Chapter 1109. Yao Jie didn't stay for long. He said a few words to Dean and left the company. Dean sent Yao Jie to the door of the company and watched him leave in an ordinary taxi. His eyes flashed slightly. He hesitated for a moment and gave up the plan to track down Yao Jie. Is the visit of the general responsible for arresting the demon attack to test something, or is it purely an accident? Dean frowned. If the latter had come to test him, then he would expose himself by following them. Moreover, he couldn't figure out the real reason for Yao Jie's visit. He was a Federation general and had a distinguished identity. How could he anonymously come to be a tester? In case there was a problem with the medicine and Yao Jie was poisoned to death, then the reputation of the general would be ruined. Even his death would be a bit funny. Moreover, with his identity, if he really wanted to treat him, he only needed to say something. A small company like Dean's would obediently deliver the medicine to him. Why would he need to come in person? But if it wasn't to test the medicine, why would he take the risk to test him? If he was suspicious, then he could directly arrest him and bring him back for interrogation. Dean couldn't figure out these two contradictions, but he felt that there must be something he had overlooked. After carefully thinking for a long time, Dean suddenly thought of a possibility. Yao Jie's abdomen was not only missing a piece of meat, but the internal organs under that piece of meat were also lost. This led to a big hidden danger in his body. He would gradually become thinner and weaker. Perhaps not many people knew about this hidden danger. Yao Jie didn't want others to know, so he didn't send people to get the medicine from him. Instead, he sneaked over, although there was a risk of death, but it was only a small number. The latter obviously chose to take the risk. Dean didn't know whether it was crazy or rational. The more Dean thought about it, the more he felt that it was the case. As for why the latter told his name and exposed his identity, perhaps it was because his body had been cured and he didn't care about being exposed. Even if his enemies knew, they wouldn't be able to target him. It seems that being a general is not easy, Dean thought. He suddenly regretted that he didn't chase after him. If the latter sneaked over, he certainly didn't alarm the people of the military to monitor him. If he tracked him, he could find out the address of the general. If he knew the address of his family, that would be even easier. He would have one more card in his hand. These generals were high-ranking members of the Federation, and their families' identities and other private matters were confidential and protected. Even a young master of a large financial group, like Felix, didn't have the right to know. Although regretful, Dean didn't continue to be annoyed. It would only continue to waste his time meaninglessly. Stopping losses was the basic rationality of a wise man. He turned back to the company. As soon as he returned to the office, Ma Jing and the other two knocked on the door and ran in. They said worriedly, "Boss, what General Yao said may happen. What should we do?" Dean said, "This is not your concern. I recruited you to help me make the drugs, not to let you operate the products. Do you want to earn extra money from me? I won't give you a raise if you do this." Ma Jing and the other two were stunned. They didn't expect him to joke around. Ma Jing smiled. "Boss, we are just worried about the situation of the company. The company is our home." Dadian waved his hand and said, "Don't think of the company as your home. Home is home. There's only one workplace. If you feel comfortable and can make money, that is the best. Even if the environment is bad, you have to endure it. If you have nothing to do, then I will recruit people to be responsible for the promotion of our medicine. While the news hasn't been leaked, we should release it as early as possible. If you want to snatch it, you have to be willing to fight." Ma Jing and the other two had a strange look on their faces. It was the first time for them to see such a boss. However, Dean's words were reasonable. It was useless for them to worry, as there was no solution to the problem. Dean issued a recruitment notice after sending off the three of them. At this time, he felt that it would be good if Barton and Noyce were around. They could be trusted and could help him. The recruited people could leak company secrets at any time, but he couldn't slowly cultivate the loyalty of the employees. Even soldiers would find it difficult to maintain loyalty in the peaceful environment of the Federation. Not to mention ordinary people. They were driven by benefits. They worked for money and not for him. It's not difficult for me to sneak out of the Federation with my current identity. I can ask Felix to pick me up. If I cross the God of War's wall, then I can go through the clouds. The Federation has equipment to isolate thunder and lightning. It's enough to deal with a flock of thunderbirds, but it will take at least half a month to go back and forth. Moreover, Noyce and Barton will have to adapt to the environment of the Federation and learn about the world. Dean thought for a moment. He felt that they wouldn't solve the urgent situation. He had to wait for the situation to stabilize and then make a long-term plan. Even if he didn't advertise the rebirth medicine, it would still spread to the ears of some big shots in a few days. He had to let everyone know that this thing belonged to him before that happened. I can only do publicity and marketing. I have to let the people of the Federation know that this thing is made by me. I need a lot of advertising, but the advertising fee won't be low. Dean's eyes flashed. Some of the popular TV and news advertisements were calculated in millions. He only had hundreds of thousands in his hands. It wouldn't make a difference in the advertising industry. I can only try low-cost marketing. If the popularity isn't enough, then I will borrow from Felix. Although he can only come up with tens of thousands of savings. But as the president of Haas Company, he can use the company's name to mobilize a lot of funds. If he is found out, then he will be out of luck. But once the reputation of the regenerative medicine is out, the demand will exceed the supply, and the funds will come back quickly. Dean's mind was racing as he thought about all kinds of things. Soon he made up his mind and decided to try low-cost marketing. He wrote a few marketing documents and was ready to hand them over to the recruited operations department. As he had bought advertising on the website, the recruitment was scrolling on the homepage. Soon people started to call him. Dean had a brief understanding and let them come over for an interview. On the way, there was a secretary recruitment. Dean asked a few questions and felt that the conditions were roughly in line with the requirements. The communicator rang again in the evening. Dean thought that it was a job seeker's call, but he heard a rather calm and gentle voice. "Is this Boss Cheen?" Dean was surprised. "Who are you?" Chapter 11:10. "Yes," Dudian asked. "How much do you need?" Song Jin was relieved and smiled. "I'll take one first." "All right, the items are expensive, so come and get them yourself," Dudian said. "Okay," Song Jin agreed. After hanging up the communicator, it didn't take long for two people who had signed the VIP contract with Dean to come to him. Dean asked them to come directly tomorrow to collect the money and the goods. The next day, when Dean arrived at the company, there were already a lot of people waiting for him. One of them was the secretary he had recruited. She was a 27-year-old beauty named Zhuing. She looked very capable. She was not the kind of capable secretaries in general, but a real capable person. At first glance, one could tell that she was an efficient person. Dean casually learned about her and accepted her. Then he handed over the recruitment to her. Zhuing didn't expect her new boss to be so young. She was a little perturbed. She felt that Dudian was like a rich second generation who just came out to start a business. She had to think of other aspects as a secretary for such a person. She secretly made up her mind that if Dudian was just a playboy, she would take the initiative to resign and leave, even if the job was very rich. After handing over the chores to Zhu Ying, Dudian waited for the 3 VIP customers who came to buy medicine. He greeted them politely and took them to the reception room. He asked Zhu Ying to make 3 cups of tea and a cup of coffee because one of them was a brown-haired foreigner. "Boss Cheen, what about the medicine?" Song Jin asked after taking a sip of tea. Dudian called Zhu Ying and asked her to find Ma Jing to get the medicine. Dudian pushed the medicine in front of the 3 people. "The medicine has been sent for review. It will take 2 days for it to pass. It can't be sold on the market for the time being. But if you're in urgent need, then we can sell it to you now. There is no problem with the medicine. Our testers have tested it. By the way, one of them is General Yao Jia." "What?" Song Jin didn't hear clearly. "What general?" "General Yao Jia?" Beside him, Wang Donglin heard it clearly. His eyes widened slightly as he said, "You mean that General Yao Jia of the Armed Combat Department?" Dudian calmly asked. "Are there many generals with the same name?" Song Jin understood and looked at him suspiciously. "How is that possible? What kind of status does General Yao Jia have? Why would he be a drug tester for you? Even if he wants to test the medicine, do you dare to let him test it? No matter how daring I am, I wouldn't dare to use a general's tiger skin coat. You'll know when you investigate this matter." Also, I have the records of their drug testing here. I can show them to you. Dean called Zhu Ying and asked her to take the files of the testers from the safe. Then, facing the three people, he told them the whole story of Yao Jie's trial. At this time, Zhu Ying's drug tester file was also sent over. Dean handed it to the three. Wang Donglin was the first to take it. He saw the photo and the name on the file. His eyes widened in disbelief. He was a soldier and had met Yao Jie several times. At a glance, he recognized that the person was General Yao Jie. He didn't expect that such a famous person would work as a tester for Dean. Soon, he thought of another problem. He was surprised and asked Dean, "What kind of injury does General Yao have? Why does he need your medicine? Isn't it not good to pry into the privacy of the general?" Dean squinted at him. Wang Donglin smiled and said, "I didn't ask. I'll buy the medicine and I'll transfer the money to you now. If it is good, can I order another batch?" "Yes, according to the contract," Dean indifferently said. Wang Donglin was relieved. He immediately transferred the money to Dean and asked how to use the medicine. "It's an injection." Dean asked Zhu Ying to bring a new syringe and handed it to Wang Donglin. "You can use it now. It will be effective immediately. If there's a problem here, I can't renege on the debt. They can also be witnesses. Come on." Wang Donglin was stunned. Was he being treated as a guinea pig? However, Dean's words were reasonable. Although there was General Yao Jie to test the medicine, but there was still a trace of uncertainty in his heart. After all, the medicine didn't pass the review. He hesitated for a moment, but decisively rolled up his sleeves and injected the medicine. My 2 fingers were pressed by the slate. The situation was urgent, so I cut them off. I don't know if they will grow back. Wang Donglin glanced at his hands, then looked up and asked Dean, "How long will it take for the medicine to take effect?" 5 to 10 minutes. Dean said. Wang Donglin, Song Jin, and the other brown-hair Martin were shocked. So fast. Song Jin looked at his watch and began to count down. Wang Donglin cried out when 4 minutes had passed. They saw that the flesh on his hand was slightly squirming. Flesh and bones slowly grew back. It didn't take long for 2 pink fingers to grow out. Seeing this scene, Song Jin and Martin, who were next to them, were dumbfounded. This is a miracle medicine." Song Jin was shocked and murmured. Things were completely expected. Dean accompanied Song Jin and Martin to complete the injection. Soon, all the missing parts of their bodies were regenerated. The 3 of them felt like they had been reborn. They exclaimed from time to time in the reception room. After finishing the medicine, the 3 of them immediately looked for Dean to place an order. Each of them ordered 5 portions of the medicine. This was the upper limit of their 1-star VIP status. The deposit for each portion was 50%, which was 1 million. Dean had 15 million as a deposit. Plus the 6 million that they had paid for the medicine, he had 21 million in his hand. It was enough to squander a little in the black market. "Mr. Chin, I want to upgrade my VIP status. Can I increase the annual fee?" Wang Donglin deliberately waited for Song Jin and Martin to leave and suddenly asked Dean. Dean glanced at him. This guy was very cunning. He said, 3-star and below can be done with money, but 4-star needs other conditions. I haven't thought about the specific conditions. Anyway, I don't plan to open it for the time being. If you want to upgrade, then pay 10 million more and I can upgrade you to a 3-star VIP. 10 million annual fee? Wang Donglin was speechless. Although he was a rich man in the North Desert City, 10 million annual fee was quite an amazing amount. This was not a comparison of assets, but pure annual expenses. Even some of the top clubs didn't need such a high annual fee. The upper limit of a 3-star VIP is 50 portions. It's 10 times more. Pay and return are equal. Dean indifferently said. Chapter 1111. Wang Donglin did not immediately increase the annual fee, but went back to allocate funds. After all, although he had money, a lot of the funds were in the various industries under his name. He needed to report the properties of these industries. On the same day, Dudian's company recruited several members of the planning and advertising department. Dudian asked Zhu Ying to gather them, and then gave them the copy that he had written for them to do. After reading the copy, several members of the advertising department were stunned. They did not expect advertising could be played like this. The next day, there was such a news in the afternoon news of North Desert City. Two people in a square had their eyes on the same clothes and quarreled. It escalated into a scuffle. One of them was pushed from the second floor of the mall and broke his arm on the spot. Some people in the crowd called the police, but before the police could arrive, the person who pushed rushed down and took out something from his bag and injected it into the person who broke his arm. By the time the mobile police arrived, the person who broke his arm had already stood up from the ground. His body was intact. Under the mediation of the police, there was no intention to blame the person who pushed the person. This strange incident quickly attracted the attention of some people. Through the surveillance video, people found that the person who broke his arm was indeed broken, but it quickly healed. This strange incident quickly attracted the attention of the majority of the people in North Desert City. Soon, some netizens found an advertisement that was played in the back of an inconspicuous small TV series. The drug that was sold in this advertisement was called regenerative medicine. The effect was described to be very magical, even magical to the point that it was somewhat fake. After this advertisement was found, it quickly attracted people's attention when it was compared to the trending news. At the same time, that night, a few more hot topics popped up. They were all things that happened around the ordinary citizens of Mo Bay City. Among them, there were people who filmed strange videos of themselves hammering off their arms and showing it to the netizens from all angles to prove that their arms were indeed broken. Then, after injecting a tube of medicine, their arms healed not long after. There were no special effects added to the video. The producer of the video also admitted that the medicine that was injected was called regenerative medicine, and it cost 2 million federal coins. The almost sky-high price of the medicine and the magical effect instantly aroused the curiosity of the people in North Desert City. Even people from other cities noticed these interesting news. The reputation of regenerative medicine was getting louder and louder. In the company, Dean, Ma Jing, and the others, as well as the advertising and planning departments, had a meeting. They listened to the various results reported by the advertising department. Everyone felt like they were in a dream. Even Ma Jing and the others who were concentrating on studying the medicine felt incomparably magical. They looked at Dean with admiration. Who would have thought that Dean would let the news platform take the initiative to advertise for him? The money invested in the advertisement was small, but it turned into a news event that attracted the attention of some popular news platforms. They pushed the news to their homepage, causing the regenerative medicine to explode in just a few days. Furthermore, the government came out to acknowledge it, announcing the price and purchasing channel, causing the regenerative medicine to become the most popular name in North Desert City. The people who admired Dudian the most were the employees of the advertising department. They came from other companies and had many years of experience in advertising planning. However, they had never thought of such a strange advertising method. However, the results made them dispel all doubts. Fame was everything. The role of advertising was to bring strong popularity. Dudian's copywriting had achieved this. I finally got a firm foothold before they started. Dean was quite satisfied with the development of the company. He just wanted to try it out, but he didn't expect the results to be so fast. In the past few days, the regenerative medicine had been approved and could be sold on the market. He also received some calls from unidentified people who intended to buy his company, but he rejected them all. As for using force, it was very difficult unless they used a shady method to nibble away at his results little by little. With the purchase of a large number of customers, a steady flow of funds was transferred into his account. He took out part of the funds to develop the company's site. He also purchased factories and pharmaceutical robots for mass production. I have 800 million in my hands, including the new VIP customers. The number of agents has increased to more than 50. Most of them are local tycoons. I have a firm foothold in North Desert City. Dean calculated the harvest of the past few days. Although the time was short, but the rapid changes in the past few days. He estimated that the savings of Felix, who was from the Lock Consortium, shouldn't be as much as his. At most, he should have 1 or 200 million. This was an overestimation. Although Felix had billions of funds in his hands, but it was from Hosk's company. All the funds were in the accounts and needed to be reported. It was very difficult for a consortium like Lock Consortium to falsify property. So it was difficult to get money, but it wasn't impossible. But in Dean's opinion, getting 1 or 200 million was the best. Beep! The communicator rang. Dean picked it up. Who is it? Hello, Mr. Chin. I'm Zhang Ziqing. I want to... A slightly nervous voice with a bit of guilt came from the other end of the phone. Dean felt that the name was a bit familiar. After a little thought, he remembered that it was the first VIP customer that he had visited. He said in a calm tone, Mr. Zhang, I remember that you have put me on the blacklist. Why are you looking for me? Zhang Ziqing was a bit embarrassed. In the past few days, the name of regeneration medicine had spread throughout the North Desert City. It even appeared in the federal news. Although it was not a household name, it was extremely popular and continued to ferment. Many jokes about regeneration medicine were spreading and getting more and more popular. He heard about it from his daughter and then personally learned about it. Only then did he find out that the person who came to find him was not the liar he thought. Mr. Chin, you must be joking. We didn't even meet at that time. I hope you can forgive me. I did it for a reason. Zhang Ziqing was sincere and ready to complain, but he was interrupted by Dean. Since I have been put on the blacklist, there is no need to talk about it. My time is very precious. I wish Mr. Zhang good health. Dean hung up the communicator. Zhang Ziqing heard the sound of the phone being hung up. His face suddenly turned ugly, and then he snorted, It's just a bottle of medicine. I don't believe I can't buy it. You blocked my ID, right? I'll find someone else to buy it. I have money. How can it be difficult for me? He was so angry that he immediately found his friend's communicator to contact him. After Dean hung up the communicator, he also blocked Zhang Ziqing's communication code. He knew that although he did not sell the medicine to him, the latter would definitely buy it from other channels. It was even possible that he could buy it on the black market. It was not difficult to get things done with money. He picked up the communicator, slowly entered a number, and dialed. Chapter 11:12. A strange male voice came from the other side of the communicator. This is Terra's Foreign Affairs Department. Who are you? My name is Chin Mo, the chairman of the Dream Company. Dean said, the regenerative medicine sold in the market these days is made by our company. Oh, Jing Chao was a little surprised. He had also heard about the regenerative medicine that had spread like wildfire in the past few days. He heard that the headquarters had purchased this regenerative medicine and was analyzing its composition. He did not expect that the owner of this popular medicine would take the initiative to contact them. Mr. Chin, what's the matter? Jing Chao didn't mention the regenerative medicine, but asked in a calm tone. Dean frowned slightly. He didn't expect the people from the big consortium to be so arrogant. He thought for a moment and said, I want to make an appointment with the person in charge of your consortium. I have a business to discuss with you. Discuss business with us? Jing Chao was stunned for a moment and couldn't help but laugh. Mr. Chin, our Foreign Affairs Department is very busy. If Mr. Chin wants to sell your company's shares, I can inform you. But if you want to talk about the distribution of regenerative medicine, then forget it. Dean slightly raised his eyebrows and was silent for a moment, then said, I want to talk about another kind of medicine. This medicine isn't on the market yet, but the market demand is not inferior to the regenerative medicine. I want to sell this medicine to your consortium. Do you think we could talk about this business face to face? Jing Chao was surprised. Your company has a drug similar to the regenerative medicine? This. Okay, I will convey this matter for you. Dean said, thank you, and hung up the communicator. He didn't expect the Terrace Consortium to be more arrogant than he had imagined. It seemed that they were quite dismissive of the regenerative medicine. He was worried that they would come to grab the patent and the pharmaceutical company. Now it seemed that he was worried too much. Terra's Consortium has dominated the Federation for hundreds of years. It is the inheritance of the god of science and technology. Its status has been respected for a long time. Even the ordinary employees are so arrogant. I don't know how arrogant the executives of the consortium are. Hundreds of years of empire will be destroyed by corruption, let alone a mere consortium. Perhaps it has already been covered with scars. Once it is pushed down, it will collapse. Dean's eyes flashed slightly. It didn't take long for Felix to contact him. How is it? Have you contacted the Terrace Consortium? Got in touch, Dudian said. He got the communication number from Felix. Ordinary people wouldn't know the communication number of the foreign minister's office. Felix let out a cry of surprise, and then probed. I heard that you were the one who made the regeneration medicine. He should have earned a lot of money, right? Why would he sell such a good thing to Traff? Could it be to protect himself? If you sell this to the Roquefy Financial Group, I'll get my father to step in. I'll definitely be able to buy it. Also, I can use this opportunity to get promoted. When I get promoted, I'll be able to give you more support. Dean interrupted his long speech. You have been dormant for many years. Can't you afford to wait? Now is not the time for you to be promoted. Do you want to enter the eyes of your brother and sister as early as possible and then be targeted by them? How confident are you that you can protect yourself from them? Your father hasn't reached the time to die of old age yet. Wouldn't it be better for you to stand up for him when it's time to pass on his position? Felix smiled bitterly. What you said makes sense. I'm just afraid of accidents. Are you afraid that I will have an accident or afraid that your father will have an accident? Dean asked. Of course I'm afraid. Felix was halfway through his words when he suddenly whispered. Why do I feel like there's something wrong with your words? Dudian indifferently said. You think too much. I have something to talk to you about. The performance of your Haas company is average. Based on the current situation, I don't know how many years it will take for you to be promoted. I'm going to invest a sum of money in you. About 500 million. Take it and run it well. Felix didn't hear clearly. How much do you want to invest in me? 500 million. Is it too little? Dudian asked. Felix was dumbfounded. Where did you get so much money? He suddenly thought of the regeneration medicine in Dudian's hands. It's only been a few days, and you've made so much money by selling regeneration medicine. My God, the total salary I've received from the consortium over the years, plus the money I've saved, doesn't even reach 500 million. That's the gap between us. Dudian bluntly said. Felix almost vomited blood. How can you talk like that? He took a deep breath and gritted his teeth. I could do a lot of things if you give me 500 million, but there will be risks. Once I succeed, I'll get huge returns. At least I'll be able to enter my father's line of sight. Your goal is to enter your father's line of sight? Dudian was slightly disappointed. Felix heard the disappointment in Dudian's tone and quickly said, It's just the first step to replace him. It's a necessary step. Dudian thought for a moment, but didn't say anything. He was afraid that the goal would be too big and scare him away. He immediately said, I'll transfer the money to you, but you have to sign a contract for the money. I can't give it to you unconditionally. I knew it, Felix whispered. Dudian made an appointment with Felix to sign the contract and then hung up the communication. In the evening, the secretary of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Terrace Consortium contacted Dudian and arranged to meet him at noon tomorrow. He also sent a plane to pick him up. Dudian rested for the night and sorted out the information. The next morning, he came to the company and handed over some simple things to Zhuing. He asked her to take care of the company's operation. Then he left the company by car. It didn't take long for an armed fighter jet, painted with the Terrace English logo, to land. Several burly bodyguards came out of it. Dudian went to meet them. The one who was in charge of receiving him was a blond, middle-aged man who claimed to be the deputy of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Terrace Consortium. After the fighter jet took off, it left the sky above North Desert City. The wilderness outside the city was in sight, and there were even air tunnels leading from North Desert City to other cities. Meanwhile, the fighter jet gradually flew higher and passed through the wilderness, passing by cities along the way. Chapter 11:13. The blond, middle-aged man didn't talk much on the way. Dean could see that although his expression was gentle and polite, his eyes were full of arrogance. It was obvious that he didn't really put Dean in his eyes. Dean wanted to ask him about things that the Terrace Consortium couldn't find on the internet. But after seeing his attitude, he knew that it was useless to ask. So he simply ignored him. The journey was exceptionally quiet. 2 hours later, the fighter jet flew in a straight line to one of the 5 main cities of the Federation, Duzhou City. This was the hinterland of the Terrace Financial Group. It could be said that the Terrace Financial Group was the local tyrant in this city. Every shop and piece of land in this city was inextricably linked to the Terrace Financial Group. It was also the headquarters of the Terrace Financial Group. Just like the other three main cities of the five main cities were also the headquarters of the other three consortiums. The most distinguished main city was called Peace City. It was the place where the president of the Federation and the high-ranking officials of the Federation lived. But the prosperity of Peace City was a bit weaker than the main cities occupied by the four consortiums. But it didn't affect the lofty image and status of Peace City in the minds of the citizens of the Federation. The fighter plane had the Terrace logo on it, so it was exempt from border checks. The Sentinels put it into the city's helipad. The blonde middle-aged man, Nicole, and Dean got off the plane. There was already a top-brand car made by a subsidiary of Terrace waiting outside the plane. Nicole and Dean got on the car and went to the Foreign Affairs office building of the Terrace Consortium. It was located on the famous Half Moon River. The employees of the building could sit in the office and see the winding, clear Half Moon River outside the building. It was one of the most expensive places in the city. "Please." Nicole got off the car and politely said to Dean. Dean looked at the towering building in front of him and the huge green area surrounding the building. He couldn't help but feel the powerful financial resources of the Terrace Consortium. Just a Foreign Affairs office building was so imposing. No wonder the headquarters of the consortium was built on the island in the middle of the city. After a while, Dean arrived at the office of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. But the minister was in a meeting at the moment, so he had to wait for the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Dudian was the only one in the big office. There was a young and beautiful secretary in front of him. There was a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked out of the floor-to-ceiling window in front of him. He could see the distant Half Moon River. There were countless short buildings and pedestrians walking on the street. They were as small as ants. From here, he could overlook everything. It seemed that he could control everything. Dean casually turned his head and looked through the wall. He found that the material inside the wall was more special, like metal and wood. Obviously, it was difficult to build such a high-rise building with hundreds of floors with ordinary construction techniques. He saw other offices on this floor, including Nichols. The sign on the desk and the door showed that he was a secretary. In another conference room, Dean saw the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Yin Changza. He had a Chinese face and was about 50 years old. He had an extraordinary temperament. He was telling others about a commercial lawsuit between the Terrace Consortium and the Michael Consortium's Jiuan Group. Dean's eyes penetrated the man's body. He found that the man's bone density was relatively high. His physique was about 3 times that of an ordinary person. In the Federation, such a physique could be regarded as a special forces soldier. I didn't expect that a Minister of Foreign Affairs like Terrace would have such a physique. It should be the result of taking drugs. I heard that the Terrace Consortium studied undeads and monsters. Some of the banned drugs didn't circulate on the market. Even ordinary citizens didn't know about the existence of these banned drugs. But it wasn't a secret to the military and other consortia. He should have been injected with Terrace biological drug, TK-27. Dudian thought in his heart. This drug was sold to the military and was one of the sources of Terrace financial resources. The price was extremely expensive. It was said that it was 10 million per unit. In comparison, his regeneration drug was a cheap product. Felix said that this drug is classified as a banned drug. It's not sold to ordinary people because they are afraid that ordinary people's physique is too high. It's easy to cause chaos. If they kill in anger, it's likely that there will be a large number of casualties before the police arrive. In the old society, it's indeed possible. But the Federation is surrounded by foreign enemies, and there are monsters lurking around. Such a promising drug isn't available to the people. Dean was slightly disappointed because he didn't see any hidden diseases in Yin Changza's body. If Yin Changza had an incurable disease, Dean might be able to use the treatment opportunity to win him over. But Yin Changza had been in a high position for a long time. Obviously, he had taken good care of himself. Even if he had some minor diseases, he would be cured. While Dean was thinking, Yin Changza's meeting was over. The secretary at the door reminded him to return to the office. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Dean sitting on the sofa drinking coffee. Yin Chang's expression didn't change in the slightest. He sat down at his desk and asked the secretary to pour a cup of tea. Then he said to Dean, "Mr. Qin M.O., I heard that you have a business to discuss with us." Dean felt the arrogance in his bones. He smiled and said, "Since Minister Yin has heard of me, I'll be straightforward. I have a drug in my hands that is better than regenerative medicine. Once it is launched into the market, it will inevitably cause a sensation. It can cure many difficult and miscellaneous diseases in the market. I'm willing to sell this drug to you. I don't know if you are willing to accept it." Yin Chang's expression didn't change at all. He smiled faintly and said, "Mr. Chinamo, from the looks of it, you're only in your early 20s this year. You're really young and promising. Whether the medicine you mentioned is good or not, we still need our experts to judge it. I wonder what price Mr. Chin would like to sell it for." Dean said, "Not much. 1 billion in cash and an opportunity to enter Randy Company to study." Yin Changza slightly raised his eyebrows. 1 billion in cash? Mr. Chin really knows how to joke. Even if it turns out to be as useful as you said, it's not worth 1 billion. Moreover, this Randy Company is a pharmaceutical company of our terrorist consortium. It's really questionable whether Mr. Chin is going there to study or for other purposes. I didn't expect the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the terrorist consortium to be such a stingy person. Dean smiled and said, "My regenerative medicine has been launched for a few days, and I've already made 800 million. To put it bluntly, the market value of regenerative medicine is 10 billion or even higher. 1 billion is just a fraction. Do you think it's too much? Do you really think I'm a poor student who doesn't know anything?" Yin Chang's face darkened slightly. He didn't expect Dean to suddenly turn hostile, but he was indeed hit by Dean's words. He was even more surprised that the regeneration medicine had earned 800 million for Dean. This speed of making money was too amazing. His face quickly changed, and he smiled and said, "Mr. Chin, you must be joking. If your medicine is really as you said, we can talk, but we need to verify the medicine you said first. Otherwise, it's useless to talk, isn't it?" Dean took out a small bottle and said, "This medicine is called hemoxilin. It can treat deformities and mental disorders. It's also very effective in the treatment of cancer. I've investigated it. The cost of treating cancer is 5 times lower than the cost of treating cancer on the market. It will become a drug that will monopolize the market." Yin Chang's eyes slightly lit up. He had never heard of such a thing. He immediately said, "I'll immediately contact the experts and let them come over to test the medicine. Let's sign a contract first. In addition, I've recorded everything we said on the video." Dean raised the communicator and said. Yin Chang's face slightly changed. He coldly said, "Mr. Chin is very cautious. I'm only guarding against villains, not gentlemen." "What do you think?" Dean indifferently said. Chapter 11:14. Did the Randy Company agree? Dean was startled. He couldn't help but be shocked. Thinking of the communication he had just picked up, he immediately asked, "Who was looking for you? You haven't reported to the Randy Company yet. How could they agree? Did they already know that I would come here and make such a request?" Yin Changza saw Dean's shocked look and felt that the horror in his heart had faded a lot. He calmly said, "The news came from the headquarters. As for how they know, it is estimated that you leaked it before. Our terrorist consortium's intelligence network is spread all over the Federation. As long as we want to know, nothing can be hidden from us. But Mr. Chin, it seems that the consortium is very optimistic about Mr. Chin. I hope Mr. Chin won't let the consortium down." The Secretary General of the headquarters personally called. Dean's face slightly changed. He felt that things were a bit strange and out of his control. Yin Changza was shocked that the headquarters would pay attention to a small character like him. But he was shocked because how did they know that he would go to the Randy Company to study? He had never told anyone about this matter. He only thought about it in his heart. Could others guess his thoughts? But he hadn't seen the Secretary General of the headquarters. Even if he had the magic mark ability, he couldn't read other people's thoughts. Was it inferred from his behavior? If so, his every move was under the surveillance of the terrorist consortium. The person who speculated his behavior was also a terrible person. These thoughts flashed through Dean's mind. His eyes were dignified. He thought for a little bit and decided to go. If the terrorist consortium was malicious to him, it would be easy to catch him with the power they had shown. It was better to take the initiative to go and see what they were planning. "When can I go?" Dean asked. Yin Changza said, since the headquarters called, they should have already said hello to the Randy Company. "You can go directly to the headquarters of the Randy Company to report." "But my medicine hasn't been tested yet. No need to test." "Mr. Chin, take it directly to the Randy Company and give it to the experts there." Yin Changza smiled politely. Dean's heart sank as he nodded slightly. He put away the bottle and left the office. Secretary Nick was at the door, leading him to take the elevator and leave the majestic office building. "They haven't even verified the medicine, but they've already agreed to my request. This means that they already knew that I would make this request. Moreover, regardless of whether the medicine is real or fake, they're willing to let me go." Dean felt as if there was a pair of cold eyes behind him, watching his every move. The owner of this pair of eyes seemed to want to see him. In that case, he would go and see. Dean called a car from the roadside and went to the Randy Pharmaceutical Company headquarters in Duyo City. They showed an extraordinary intelligence network and didn't hide anything. "It seems that they are sure that I will go." Dean sat in the car and looked at the scenery outside the window. His eyes were calm as he thought about the pros and cons of the matter. The possibility of the other party being malicious was not big. The reason why they found him should not be because of his pharmaceutical ability, but because of his identity as a demon. In addition, he couldn't think of anything else that was worth the attention of the terrorist consortium. "Felix, I'm going to the Randy Pharmaceutical Conglomerate's headquarters. They took the initiative to invite me there, and I suspect that they have ulterior motives. If there are any accidents, immediately spread the news that the Randy Pharmaceutical Conglomerate is secretly hiding monsters and make a big commotion." Dean used the communicator to contact Felix. Although he felt that the Randy Company shouldn't be malicious, otherwise he could directly arrest them. But who could be sure that they didn't deliberately make him think so? Perhaps they wanted to lure him into the trap. They were worried that he would counterattack and minimize the casualties. So, he still had to be prepared. "Is it the Randy Company of the terrorist consortium?" Felix was shocked. "What are you going to do there? Since you know that their purpose is not pure, why do you still want to go?" "I suspect that they know my identity as a demon," Dean said in a deep voice. Felix was stunned. "How is it possible? I didn't tell anyone. If they know your identity, then what are you going to do? Run." "It's useless to run." Dean shook his head. The other party's intelligence network knew his identity as a demon. If he wanted to escape, then he wouldn't be able to leave Dujon City before he was caught. If something happens to you, don't confess to me. If I go in, then no one will bail you out," Felix suddenly said. There was a bit of tension in his voice. Dean indifferently said, "I know, but if you don't find a way to get me out, then you can come in and accompany me." Felix gritted his teeth. "I'll definitely find a way, but you have to give me time. I'll arrive at the Randy Company in 2 hours. If there's no problem, I'll contact you in an hour." Dean said, "If I don't contact you, then it means that something happened to me. You have to find a way to get me out within 48 hours. If something happens, I'm afraid I won't live for 48 hours. Too tight, time is too tight." Felix couldn't help but say, "That's it." Dean hung up the communicator. He didn't continue to wrangle with him. Terra's Consortium, the head of the 4 consortiums. It has hundreds of years of heritage and was founded in the hands of the god of science and technology. Dean slightly narrowed his eyes. Among the 4 consortiums, the Terra's Consortium stood aloof from worldly affairs. However, most of the technological products in the Federation came from the Terra's Consortium. The foundation of this consortium was so powerful that Locke, Milan, and Michael consortiums were deeply afraid of it. This was also the reason why Locke Consortium was eager for quick success in developing the monster mecha. It was normal for there to be gaps between consortiums, but if the gap was too big, it would make people feel fear and uneasiness. Obviously, the other 3 consortiums were afraid of the bottomless foundation of the Terra's Consortium. They were worried that one day they would be swallowed up. There's only one possibility that they know my identity as a demon. It's the demon attack in North Desert City. Dean narrowed his eyes. With the level of detail of their investigation, they should have arrested me and interrogated me. However, they didn't. Instead, they pushed out a few followers to attack the Church of Gods. It seems that they had noticed me a long time ago, but they didn't beat the grass to scare the snake. Since the terrorist consortium knows about this, it means that North Desert City is also a secret force of the terrorist consortium. General Yao Jie, who is responsible for the investigation, has a high position in the Federation. I didn't expect him to be a member of the terrorist consortium. Dean took a deep breath and put his hand on his heart. Perhaps a fierce battle was imminent, or perhaps it was just a false alarm. He could only hope that it would be a good result. 2 hours passed quickly. Dean came to the entrance of the terrorist company. The headquarters of the terrorist company was more majestic than the previous foreign affairs building. The surrounding environment was extremely green, spacious, and clean. There was a huge statue in front of the company. It was the god of science and technology of the Federation. Dean looked up and felt that the latter was looking down at him. There was a mysterious smile on his face. Dean took a deep breath and went in. He showed his identity card in the hall. Soon, a woman in a business suit trotted over. She looked at Dean and said, "Mr. Chin, the headquarters has arranged for you to come to our R&D department. Please come with me." Dean was startled. He slightly restrained his strength and nodded. "Please." The woman in business attire led the way in the front. They took the elevator and went to the vast factory building behind the Randy company. They passed through 4 or 5 buildings in a row before stopping. This is the R&D department of the terrorist company. There are famous scientific academicians here. The woman in business suit couldn't hide the respect and pride on her face. She introduced Dean and took him to the registration office of the R&D building. "It seems that they really want me to come to study?" Dean was surprised. He felt that he couldn't understand the terrorist consortium. The woman in front of him was not a disguise. 9 out of 10 of her words were true. How could the terrorist consortium dare to let him come to the place where the valuable scientific academicians worked? Weren't they afraid of being killed by him? Don't they know my identity as a demon? Dean was suspicious. Just because of the regenerative medicine, they put me in such a high position. Chapter 11:15. Hearing the woman's words, the woman's eyes widened. She turned to look at the young Dean with astonishment. It must be known that many famous academicians had developed a lot of drugs for the company, but none of them were able to get the highest authority. At most, they were only able to get the first level of authority. And the highest authority was only available to the legal representative of the company and the existence of the consortium. Even the directors of the consortium couldn't touch it. Dean's eyes moved, and his mood that had just calmed down suddenly tightened. Although he didn't know the management system of the Randy company, but the highest authority should not be casually given. Did a regenerative drug really have such a great charm? Moreover, the Randy company actually allowed him to participate in all the drug experiments of their company. This was simply a little too much. "Millie, are you sure?" The woman in the business suit put away the shock on her face and couldn't help but ask. Millie shook her head and said, "It's recorded in the system. There's no mistake, unless our system is hacked. But there should be no one in the entire Federation who can hack into our system." The woman in the business suit was startled. She thought that the people who were good at network technology in the Federation were all in the terrorist consortium, who could hack into the system of their company. But if the system was right, did the consortium really put so much hope on this young man? Dean heard the words of the two and came back to his senses. He asked, "Can I participate in all the experiments? What if the experiment fails because of my participation?" Millie respectfully said, "Mr. Chin, you have the highest authority and are eligible to participate in all the experimental projects. As for destroying the experiment, I don't know. But your status is currently the same as our company's chairman. Only the board of directors of the consortium can revoke your status." Dean nodded slightly, but his mood was somewhat heavy. He couldn't guess the thoughts of the terrorist consortium, but there must be something fishy about the abnormality. He could only take one step at a time and figure out the situation first. Then, "Miss Millie, please introduce me to your company. Dean said after thinking for a moment. Millie nodded gladly. The woman in business attire saw that Dean was not found and could not help but feel sorry. Although she did not know why this young man was so appreciated by the consortium, but it was certainly right to curry favor with such a person. Unfortunately, she had missed this opportunity. Under Millie's detailed introduction, Dean had a general understanding of the composition of Randy Company. He estimated that almost an hour had passed. He interrupted Millie's explanation and went to the corner to contact Felix. "Are you all right?" "That's great." The communicator quickly connected, and Felix's relieved voice could be heard. Dean said, "Nothing for the time being." Felix smiled and said, "It seems that you were too paranoid before. Since there's nothing else, I'll be busy." "Wait," Dean said, "I'll contact you again in 2 hours. If I don't contact you, then continue with the original plan." Felix was stunned. "Is that really necessary?" "It's necessary." Dean hung up the communication. Dean went back to Millie and listened to her introduction of the scientific academicians of Randy Company. After listening to them one by one, he took his staff card from her hand and went to the elevator. He scanned the staff card and went up to the laboratory floor above the high-rise building. When the elevator door opened, Dean saw many people in white coats and isolation suits shuttling through the corridor. Dean avoided the surveillance cameras and used his X-ray vision to scan the entire floor. He saw that there were 5 huge laboratories, and in each laboratory there were 2 or 3 to 5 academicians in white coats. They were dressed like doctors. In one of the laboratories, 4 academicians were dressed even more exaggeratedly. They were fully armed and wearing gas masks. The laboratory door was a double spiral metal door that was tightly sealed. Dean estimated that even with his own strength, he would need to punch hard to open the door. So many drugs. Dean saw the shelves in the laboratories were full of glass bottles. All of them were medicines produced by Randy Company. Some of them were widely circulated in the market. The academicians inside seemed to be studying how to improve them. The rich research atmosphere permeated the entire floor, making people want to participate in it. Of course, this referred to the people who were also obsessed with pharmaceutics. Dean praised the management of Randy Company in his heart, then turned into the elevator and continued to go up. Every time he came out to observe for a moment until he came to the top laboratory. Only the academicians with level 1 authority could enter here. Even if other people wanted to come in, the staff card was not set enough authority, so the elevator couldn't go up. There were only 3 laboratories on this floor. The area was more spacious. 2 of the laboratories were empty. Only 1 laboratory was in operation. There were 3 older academicians, 2 men and 1 woman. One of them was an old man with blonde hair and deep cheeks. It could be seen that he was young and elegant. The other one had gray hair and a Chinese face. There was a woman in her 40s who also had a Chinese face. She had a quiet and elegant, mature temperament. Dean glanced at them and was attracted by the situation in the laboratory. His eyes flashed a chill. He saw 2 metal crosses in the laboratory, tied to 2 slightly mutated walking corpses. At first glance, it was not long since they were infected from humans to walking corpses. Their skin still retained human skin color, and they wore simple uniforms of the Randy Company. Are these experimental mice cultivated by Randy Company? Dean looked at the 2 undeads, a man and a woman. Both were very young. At the moment, their faces were ferocious. They were roaring at the 3 academicians who were talking. The other experiments on the lower floors were using mice. They were also studying the drugs that were circulating in the federal market. Only in this way, the pain of the Federation couldn't be exposed. Although he was mentally prepared, he still couldn't help but sigh when he saw the other side of this conscientious enterprise that was highly praised by the citizens of the Federation and respected by countless people. But soon, Dean cheered up and felt a trace of excitement. Felix was right. The terrorist consortium was really studying the undeads and trying to crack the secrets of the undeads. I came to the right place. Dean was happy. He carefully looked at the instruments in the laboratory. He had never seen these instruments before. He couldn't even find them on the market. He couldn't even identify the effects. The next moment, Dean's mind suddenly became alert. Randy Company raised his authority to the highest level. Was it to let him participate in the undead's experiment? Weren't they afraid that he would be scared and the news would spread? Unless they knew that he was a demon, they would never be scared by such a small thing. As expected, they knew his identity. Chapter 11:16. Ding! Dudian swiped his card at the door. The metal spiral door of the laboratory opened. The three people inside were surprised by the sudden opening of the door. They turned around and saw a strange face. "Who are you?" The quiet woman frowned and asked softly. Dudian smiled. "My name is Chin Mo. I have just arrived at your company. I came to see the experiment. Are you studying the undeads?" Chin Mo. The blond old man frowned. He didn't remember the name. He noticed that Dudian could open the door of the laboratory. He asked, "Do you have level 1 authority?" Dudian smiled. "The consortium has given me the highest authority. They allow me to participate in all the experiments of the company." Highest authority? The three were shocked. They had been in the company for many years and had made countless contributions, but they were only given level 1 authority. As far as they knew, the highest authority of the company was basically not granted to the employees. "Were you sent by the consortium?" Another white-haired old man frowned. Dean smiled and said, "I'm just here to study. Please forgive me if I disturb the three of you." The white-haired old man saw that Dudian avoided his question, so he didn't continue to ask. He was slightly dissatisfied in his heart. The consortium had promoted such a young junior to the highest authority of the company. What was the significance of them who had dedicated their lives to the company? However, he had seen too many people who relied on their background to reach high positions. Although there was dissatisfaction in his heart, he didn't show it. He just nodded to Dudian and continued to look at the experimental data in his hand. "Chin Mo, to be on the safe side, I have to verify your identity." The quiet and mature woman smiled sweetly. "My name is Chu Huiru. I'm a bioinformatics expert." "Hello." Dudian nodded and handed over his employee card to her for scanning. Chu Huiru was startled for a moment as she saw the results of the scan. She sighed in her heart, but her face was gentle as usual. She returned the employee card to Dudian. "Mr. Chin Mo is really young and promising. I hope that we will have a pleasant cooperation in the future. All three of you are my seniors. I hope that the seniors will be generous in teaching me." Dudian laughed. The three of them saw that his attitude was humble and his tone was sincere. The dissatisfaction in their hearts gradually faded and their attitudes became much more relaxed. They each introduced themselves. The golden-haired old man was called Sovas, and the white-haired old man was called Qian. "Master Qian, do you want to study the medicine to cure the undead?" Dean casually asked after a few words of greeting. Qian shook his head and smiled. "Of course not. There hasn't been any significant progress in the medicine for the treatment of the undead for so many years. The company's research funding in this area has also been reduced. Now, no one is doing this kind of useless research. We are extracting the virus from the corpse and decomposing it. We hope to extract the cyclic fission gene from the corpse virus." "Cyclic division gene?" Dean was curious. Qian smiled and said, "This is a conjecture put forward by an expert 20 years ago from the research of the undead. Unfortunately, he has passed away. In recent years, the conjecture of the cyclic splitting gene has been confirmed. It seems to really exist. In our research, we have also found some clues. If we can really extract it, it will have a great effect. It can increase the lifespan of ordinary people, and it is even possible to achieve immortality." "Immortality?" Dean was surprised. "Is there life in this world that can be immortal?" "Not in the past, but it is hard to say in the future." Qian revealed a mysterious smile. Chu Huiru looked serious. "Even if it can't make people immortal, but it can greatly increase their lifespan. Living for 400 or 500 years isn't a problem. Think about it. If everyone's lifespan can be greatly increased, then the butterfly effect will be very strong. A person who has lived for 500 years will have a profound knowledge. Coupled with the reproductive power of human beings, the territory will expand more than 10 times. Maybe we can reclaim the position of the Earth's hegemon." Dean nodded. Even if the lifespan doubled, the butterfly effect would be unimaginably terrible. But how could there be such a thing in the undead virus? He thought of the body structure of the ice worm, the immortal cells, and the infinite division of metamorphosis. The virus appeared after the invasion of the Earth by the magic worms. Now it seemed that it was very likely that the virus was put on the Earth by the magic worms. These undead are infected. Is there no way to restore them to human form? Dean asked the three. Sawa shook his head and said, once a zombie is completely infected, it's basically hopeless. The cells and memory carriers in the brain have all been torn apart by the mutation caused by the virus. Even if the body can be restored to human form, the brain can't be restored. The human brain is the most complicated machine, and with the current technology, it's impossible to completely repair a damaged brain. Dean's heart was cold. He felt as if a thorn was piercing his heart, but he still asked, is there no way? There are so many infected people. If we can cure them, then the value is not greater than the creation of the immortality medicine. Qianni chuckled. How can it be compared? If there is an immortality medicine, then the value is incomparable. What is more attractive than immortality in this world? Those who were infected were just ordinary people. Even if a cure could be developed, who would buy it? Do their relatives have so much money to buy the medicine? If there is, then they won't let their relatives leave the city and get infected. Dean was startled. He felt as if his heart was squeezed and squeezed by a hand. Qianni's words caused his brain to heat up, and he even wanted to tear the three of them apart. However, his rationality made his body stand like a nail on the spot. Perhaps he should have seen through this earlier. The big shots wanted to live forever and continue to enjoy life. Ordinary people only wanted to save their lives. However, the big shots controlled most of the resources. It was destined that the resources would tilt according to their wishes. Even if there was a medicine that was suitable for ordinary people, it was only because the market demand was large and they could fill their pockets. So, the company is no longer doing research in this area. Dean was silent for a long time, then slowly opened his mouth. Chu Huiru was keenly aware of the fluctuations in the young man's aura. She immediately said, it's not that the company is not doing research in this area, but no one is willing to do it. Not to mention the difficulty, the funding is small. If the research fails, they will be criticized. Unless there is 70% or 80% certainty, then it is just asking for trouble. Dean exhaled and said, I know. Can I participate in this experiment? I will only observe. I won't affect you. The three looked at each other, but thinking that Dean had the highest authority, they could not refuse. Qianni nodded. Okay, you are still young. It is good to watch. Thank you, Master Qian. Dean thanked. Chapter 11:17. Dean watched from his side and didn't disturb them. He casually went to the other side of the laboratory. There was a row of metal cabinets. It looked like the ones in the morgue. Dean opened one of the cabinets. There was a pale girl lying inside. Her lips were pale. She didn't have any clothes on her body. Her body was clean, and there was no wound. Dean looked at the cabinet and pushed it back. He opened the cabinet next to it. There was a baby inside. It looked like a ceramic sculpture. It was quietly lying inside. There was no breath. China Mo, what are you doing? Chu Huiru noticed Dudian and asked in a soft voice. Dean turned around and smiled. Nothing. I'm just looking around. Did I disturb you? Shaking her head, Chu Huiru replied. Those in the freezers are our test subjects. Most of them died of diseases, and their families donated them to us. We're using their bodies for research, and I hope that we can gain something from it. Dean smiled. If we can use their bodies to develop medicines that will benefit society, then it can be considered as accumulating merits for them. Chu Huiru smiled. This is also something we have to work hard on. At this time, Qian, Yi, and Sora's seemed to be talking about a contradiction. They immediately pulled Chu Huiru over. Dean strolled to the metal shelf next to the freezer. There were many bottles and jars on it. They were of different sizes. They were labeled with letters. There was no name or record of the effect. Qian, Yi, and Sora's were able to identify what was inside from the labels. He picked up the bottles and glanced at them. Then he went to the other side of the laboratory. There was a row of bookshelves. There were a lot of documents on them. He took out two of them and looked at them. One was the genetic data of coiled tiger beast. The other one was the investigation report of melanosis. He quickly flipped through it, and with his extraordinary memory, he memorized the knowledge inside. Although he didn't understand some things, he could slowly learn them in the future. After reading 7 or 8 documents in a row, he deeply felt the advanced technology of the Federation. There were many things that he had never heard of, and he couldn't understand them at all. Even if he learned all the knowledge in the super chip, he would only barely be able to deduce 1 or 2 of them. There was no end to learning. Dean sighed in his heart. At the same time, he was excited. This was a good thing for him. Chuhuiru paid attention to Dean from time to time as she discussed with Qian, Yi, and Saul. She saw that Dean was casually flipping through the experimental materials. It seemed that he was just putting on an act. After a few glances, she no longer paid attention to it. Undead limb replacement surgery. Dean suddenly pulled out a thick document. After opening it, he saw the title of these words. His eyes were slightly bright, and he quickly flipped down. This document recorded an operation. The experimenter had a whimsical idea. He put together the body tissues of different undeads, hoping to find out the secrets of the undead's body. From the results of the experiment, the arm and thigh of different undeads were swapped, but there was no effect. Under the delicate surgical stitching of the experimenter, an undead body could be embedded with 4 or 5 other undead arms. When attacking, each undead arm could actually move. The neural existence of undead. Dean saw the conclusions and speculations of the experimenter. He felt that the harvest was not shallow. He had never thought of using this method to study undead before. He did not expect that the limbs of undead would not reject each other and could even reconnect the severed limbs. Soon, the document was finished. Dean did not linger. He inserted it back and continued to pull out another one to continue to read. Time passed quickly. In the laboratory, in addition to the sound of Dean flipping through the papers, there was the sound of Chuhuiru and the other 2 discussing the experiment. From time to time, they dissected and mobilized the electronic beeps. Conditioned reflex training method. Dean saw the method of using conditioned reflex to train the undead in one of the documents. He could not help but feel a little strange. He had to say that there were many smart people in the world. The wisdom of the Federation had accumulated for hundreds of years. They had already studied the undead from various aspects, including the previous undead limb replacement surgery. He also saw a related conjecture from another document. That was to put multiple undead together to create a stronger undead. Then use conditioned reflex to train the undead legion. It was also mentioned in this document that when the undead evolved to a certain extent, the mutated brain tissue would extend a new consciousness. This consciousness could be said to be instinct, and there may be a situation of dream return. The so-called dream return was that the residual memory fragments in the mutated brain of the undead were preserved and may be integrated into the new consciousness and instinct. Simply put, it was the birth of a consciousness with a few fragments of memories, but this consciousness was dominated by the instinct of the undead, bloodthirsty, killing. Some undead, after the birth of consciousness, even opened their mouth to speak simple words, but there was no moral judgment, no concept of life and death, and the temptation of blood was irresistible. Even if it was the closest person, they would bite to death. The experimenter used a well-cultivated child undead to do the experiment. The child undead could spit out simple words after the birth of consciousness, and even giggled. The experimenter found her close relatives and tried to awaken her memory and restore her humanity. But the child rushed to her mother. Although trapped in a cage, her face was bloodthirsty, and she was even calling for her mother. Many experiments have shown that the undeads with consciousness are more difficult to control than the undeads with pure instincts. The broken memories will not give them human morality, but will let them grow slowly, become treacherous, learn to disguise, and even use simple strategies. Dean thought of the corpse king that had bitten Aisha. He would never forget the battle that day. The treachery shown by the corpse king was still vivid in his mind. Obviously, It was a corpse king that had been born for a long time. Honed in the wilderness, it had long become treacherous and insidious. The undead's consciousness is generally at rank 7, about 1,000th is at rank 6, and about 6% is at rank 8. The statistics on the data were very complete. Dean compared it with the army. The rank 7 was about the pioneer, using the limbs of the high-level undead, sowing the brain of the low-level undead, and training with conditioned reflex to cultivate the high-level undead legion. Dean looked at the expected results on the data and soon felt a chill. The Federation may have already implemented this. In addition to the mecha, they also have a group of high-level undead legion who are not afraid of death. Chapter 11:18. It is indeed the fastest way to enhance strength by using the simple violence of the undeads and the unified cultivation of the conditioned reflex. Dean felt that he would use this method in the future. If he wanted to overthrow the behemoths like the Federation and the Empire, this was definitely the best way to arm his forces quickly. There was no other way. Dadian was about to continue reading when Chu Huiru suddenly came over and smiled. "Chinamo, it's getting late. Let's go for dinner." Dadian turned around and saw that the three of them had taken off their gloves and untied their antibacterial coats. It seemed that they were ready to get off work. He put the book back and nodded. "Okay." They left the laboratory together and locked the metal door. This kind of lock wasn't like the previous one. It required 3 people's fingerprints and irises to open it. Otherwise, even Dadian, with the highest authority, wouldn't be able to open the door. Of course, there was another way, which was to activate the emergency security system. But the entire building would be aware of it and the alarm would ring. The 3 of them talked about the next direction of the experiment as they walked. Most of them were using technical terms which Dadian couldn't understand. The scientific and technological system of the Federation wasn't at the level of the old era. In addition to the elements table, many new particles and experimental methods have been replaced with new terms. It would take a specialized system to learn about them. "Chinemo, you don't seem to be afraid of the undeads?" Chu Huiru asked Dadian after she finished talking to Qian. Qian Yi and Sol remembered that Dadian had turned a blind eye to the undeads in the laboratory. "Aren't they locked? What's there to be afraid of?" Dadian faintly smiled at the careful woman. "They should be afraid of us. After all, they are just experimental materials in our hands. They have the same status as white mice." Chu Huiru was a little surprised. She smiled and said, "You really have a thick nerve." Qianni laughed. "It's a good thing to be bold. Chinemo has a bright future. His achievements may surpass us in the future." Dadian modestly replied. It didn't take long for them to take the elevator to the restaurant of the building. The restaurant was located in the middle of the building. Melodious and soft piano music floated into their ears as the elevator door opened. The decoration of the hall was mild. It wasn't bright or dazzling. It was very quiet. There were only a few people eating in the hall. The 4 of them found a place to sit down. Immediately a waiter came forward to inquire. The 3 of them ate here every day, so they quickly reported the food and juice they wanted. Dean didn't care about this, so he ordered a steak and a hot drink. After ordering, Qianni smiled at Dadian. "Mr. Dean, I see that you don't reject the undeads. Do you want to do related research in the future?" The Terrace Consortium focused on the research of walking corpses, but they also conducted research in other areas. Even a Randy pharmaceutical company would not only use walking corpses as experimental subjects, but they would also choose various magical creatures as experimental subjects. Some of the magical creatures contained special antibiotics or vaccines, and many of them were beneficial to humans, as they could strengthen the human body's immunity. Dadian knew that Qian Yi and Chu Huiru were experts in the field of undeads. They were experts in this field. Asking them to study monsters was tantamount to changing their profession. Qian Yi said so because he wanted to win him over to join his group. Dadian immediately took the opportunity to say, "I didn't think too much about the future. I'm very interested in undeads and monsters. Today I read a lot of information, although I didn't understand a lot of it, but it seems that undeads are more interesting." Qian Yi's eyes lit up. Oh, interesting. I saw a piece of information that said undeads can use the limbs of other undeads. I think that the world is full of monsters, but the number of undeads can't be ignored. Moreover, I think undeads are more important than monsters. Dudian said in a serious tone. Qian Yi's eyes lit up even more. Saul, who was next to him, showed a curious look. What do you mean by more important? Many aspects, Dudian said. I think that if humans want to recapture the Earth, then perhaps we can completely crack the secrets of undeads. Then we can achieve this ideal. Chu Huiru looked at him, her eyes showing a bit of brilliance. What do you mean? She asked. Dudian looked into the woman's eyes. I don't know the root cause of the destruction of the old era, but the monsters and the undeads are the mutated beasts of the old era. Although there are many of them, but their intelligence is generally low. They can't unite, so we can ignore them for the time being. But the undeads are different. They're the people of the old era or adventurers who have been out for hundreds of years. They were infected and mutated by the virus. If we can restore their memories and sanity, then we can imagine that the number of humans will increase by more than 10 times, or even dozens or hundreds of times. There is strength in numbers. If the number of humans increases by 100 times, then why should we be afraid of the monsters? Even if we have to fight, we can afford it. Qian Yi and the other two looked at each other in blank dismay. They didn't expect Dean's thoughts to be so broad. He was actually thinking about the future of the entire human race. Such a mind and vision made the three surprised, but also a bit ashamed. They only considered the particularity of the undead. It was more mysterious than the monsters. The research potential was greater, the harvest was more, the value was more, and it could benefit human beings. But they never thought that the impact of this experiment on the entire human race would be to help humans recapture the Earth and return to the position of the hegemon. Qian Yi sighed and said, China Mo, you are very far-sighted. Even I haven't thought about this. But this idea is good, but it is impossible to do it. He sighed and said, let the undeads restore their memories and turn back into humans. Such experiments have been researched by consortiums for hundreds of years, but they have all failed. This is irreversible. Just like a dead person, there is no way to resurrect them. Even with the current technology, it is meaningless to restore the heartbeat of the dead and restore the vitality of the body. It can only be a vegetable. Let the living corpse accompany the family and comfort them. Dudian's face was slightly gloomy. He came to terrace full of hope, but the answer he got was always the same sentence. There was no way. At the moment, his heart was full of anger. He even wanted to smash the table in front of him. Hundreds of years of research, but there was no progress. Are you all good-for-nothings? Are you all trash? But he didn't say this out loud. After a few breaths, he suppressed his anger. He knew that these research experts were all intelligent people, and it was precisely because of this that this matter gave him such a heavy blow. For hundreds of years, countless experts had studied, but there was no answer. Would he be able to do it alone? Although he didn't want to admit it, the probability was so low that it was powerless. He never looked down on himself, nor would he overestimate himself. But even if the hope was slim, should he give up? If he gave up, who else in this world would fight for this matter? Who else would fight for her? Thinking of her figure wandering in the wilderness like a lonely ghost, Dudian felt a stab of pain, like a sharp knife stabbing into his heart. That was a hand he could never let go, even if he had to fight for his whole life. If I can live a little longer, if 10 years is not enough, then 100 years. If 100 years is not enough, then a few hundred years. In the next few hundred years, the level of technology may be unimaginable now. At that time, there will definitely be a cure. Dudian secretly thought, and suddenly felt a burst of hope. He thought that the technology of the old era, from the creation of steam engines to the launch of nuclear bombs, was less than 100 years. Once the technology took off, the speed of development was unimaginable. He believed that there would be more magical technology in the future. Qian Yi saw that Dudian was suddenly silent and seemed to be hit. He comforted him. Don't be discouraged. Although we can't do what you said, but the value of the undead is extremely high. We can dig out more good things to benefit the society. We can take a big step at once, but we can run step by step. Sooner or later, we will run to the highest position in the world. Dudian had restored his calmness. He nodded and pretended to think, and then said, I intend to apply to the company to study the undead. Qian-Yi was surprised. So fast? You don't want to participate in our experiment? Dudian smiled. Of course I want to participate. I want to learn more from the seniors. When I have learned enough, I will do my own research. If there is anything I don't understand, I will ask the three of you. I hope you can teach me. Haha, well said. Qian-Yi laughed. At this time, the waiter brought the dinner of the few people. The few of them chatted as they ate, casually chatting about the experiment and the recent interesting news. After eating, they left and went back to their respective residences. Dudian told Felix that he was safe, and then he found Millie and asked her to take him to the residence assigned to him by the company. The residence was in the company building, and the environment was no less than a high-end hotel. After taking a bath, Dudian lay on the soft bed, looking at the brilliant night view outside the floor-to-ceiling window, and then looked at the huge crystal chandelier on the ceiling. In a trance, there was a feeling of returning to the old era, but he knew that this was not the old era. Although it was also a modern world of technology, but the people had changed. Gently sighing, Dudian closed his eyes and fell asleep comfortably. It had been a long time since he had such a relaxing rest. Dudian slept until dawn, feeling full of spirit. He got up to wash and went to the restaurant to eat breakfast. He happened to meet Chu Huiru, so he took her table and ate together. You got up so early? Chu Huiru was surprised by Dudian's diligence. Chapter 1119. I heard that Mr. Chin Mo has created a regenerative medicine. You are really extraordinary to be able to do such a big thing at such a young age. Chu Huiru's tone was soft. Dudian knew that she went back last night to inquire about his information. Perhaps she also knew that, in addition to regenerative medicine, he was just a poor student with no background. He estimated that at the moment she was curious about why he was favored by the consortium and parachuted into the company to get the highest authority. He did not answer her directly. He humbly smiled and pretended to be mysterious. He changed the topic to the weather. Chu Huiru didn't ask directly, as she saw that Dudian didn't know anything. They casually chatted for a while and went to the laboratory with Dudian after dinner. Dudian didn't understand the meaning of the Terrace Consortium, but since the other party had given him the highest authority, he could participate in all the experiments at will. He was happy to use this shortcut to understand the many experiments of the Terrace Consortium. He also learned about the secrets of the Federation that ordinary people didn't know. During the day, he would watch Qian-Yi and Chu Huiru's experiments. Sometimes he would read the materials and learn about them. At night, he would return to his residence and contact Felix. He asked him to send people to take care of the Dream Company. Originally, he didn't want to mix the Dream Company with Felix. He wanted to use the company as his base in the Federation. In the future, he would accept Barton and Noyce to help him. The so-called Cunning Rabbit has 3 burrows. He had a nest in the Empire and a nest in the Federation. No matter which side of the war, in the future, he would be able to get benefits. But the appearance of Terrace had broken his fantasy. Now that his identity had been exposed, Dreamscape Incorporated naturally had no hope of operating under the Federation's nose and hiding a large number of demons. He might as well hand it over to Felix to help him seize power in the Rock 5 financial group as soon as possible and work for himself in the future. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. Qian-Yi and Chu Huiru's experiment was coming to an end. In the past half a month, Dudian had seen a lot of other experts in addition to observing in their laboratory. He had also visited the laboratory of experts who were studying monsters. Although monsters and undeads were different types of research, but in his view, they were all creatures. So it was inevitable that there would be commonalities. The facts proved that his idea was right. There were many references to undeads experiments. Some people even listed some classic cases of undeads in their papers to prove their views and conjectures. It still doesn't work. In the laboratory, Chu Huiru's usually calm and elegant face was now wrinkled and full of worry. Beside her, Qian, Ian Salvas had gloomy expressions and didn't say a word. Dean was flipping through the information. He heard their movements. He knew that their experiments for so many days had been declared bankrupt. The three of them had tried many aspects but ultimately failed to create longevity medicine. In fact, the experiment had reached a bottleneck a week ago, but the three of them were unwilling to give up. They tried every possible way, but in the end, no matter how much they racked their brains and tried everything, they still failed. If the project failed, the three people's ratings in the company would also drop. When it dropped to a certain level, they would be fired by the company. Dean quietly put down the experimental data in his hand and left the laboratory. He didn't want the three to vent their anger on him. Although they didn't dare to be angry in public, but if they were secretly angry, it would add trouble to him. After leaving the laboratory, Dean went to the restaurant to order food. He saw a gray-haired old woman sitting in the corner. The old woman was wearing an expert's clothes. Her dress was simple, but her temperament was very dignified. She was looking at the bowl of noodles in front of her. "Grandma Lan Xin, what's wrong with you?" Dean immediately went over. Zhang Lanxin recovered from her melancholy. When she saw a handsome young man, she couldn't help but smile. It's Qin Mo. Dean knew that she was from the faction that studied monsters. Seeing that she was a little annoyed, he asked, "Grandma Lan Xin, is there something wrong with the experiment?" Zhang Lanxin was kind to Dean. She shook her head and smiled. "It's nothing. I just miss the children a little." "Miss the children?" "Lan Xin, did those bastards come to find you again?" At this time, an old but very dignified voice next to her coldly snorted. Dean looked up and saw that it was Kong Ji, Zhang Lanxin's frequent research partner. He couldn't help but be surprised. "Master Kong, someone dares to find trouble with Grandma Lan Xin?" Kong Ji recognized Dean and knew that he had a big background. His attitude towards him was relatively calm. He didn't treat him as a junior. He coldly snorted. "They're a group of damn things. I say, we shouldn't care about these scumbags. It's best to let them fend for themselves." "You can't say that. They are innocent." Zhang Lanxin's soft face slightly stiffened. She seemed to be a little angry. Kong Ji seemed to be a little afraid. He turned to Dean and said, "You don't know. Your Grandma Lan Xin likes to do good deeds. She is overflowing with love. Unfortunately, in this world, good people don't get good rewards. Your grandma has been doing research in the company for many years. All the money she earned was donated to the poor areas of the outer city to treat cancer and nuclear radiation infection. It was a good thing, but who knew that 2 of her experiments had failed? She had no money in her hands. Those who were helped by her found her and asked her to pay for the follow-up treatment. You see, she lives in the company. She has no money. How can she pay for their treatment? The result is that these bastards are blocking the company's door every day. It's as if she owes them money." Dean was dumbfounded. He didn't expect it to be such a small matter. Kong Ji turned to Zhang Lanxin. "You can borrow money from me for other things. But if you want to donate to these heartless bastards, I will never agree." Zhang Lanxin wanted to say something, but stopped. She sighed. "It's all my fault. It's all my fault." Dean was speechless. Although he saw that the grandma was kind-hearted, he didn't think that she would be good to this point. He shook his head. "It's not your fault. I will help you solve this matter. You don't have to worry about it." Zhang Lanxin was startled. "Are you willing to lend me money?" Dean asked. "Are you willing to continue to fill the gaps of these vampires?" Zhang Lanxin sighed. Their loved ones are in the ward. They are anxious for money. Kong Ji was about to get angry when Dean interrupted. "There are too many people like this in the world. Grandma, how much can you help?" "Yes." Kong Ji immediately shouted. Zhang Lanxin hesitated for a moment. "If you're willing to lend me money and help them, I won't do such things again." Dean saw that she seemed to wake up. He was relieved and said, "No problem. Leave it to me this time." Kong Ji snorted and turned his head. Chapter 1120. After Dean promised Zhang Lanxin, he didn't delay and went outside the company building. Soon he saw a group of people wandering on the street, wearing plain clothes. These people were civilians with poor living conditions. Some of them hadn't even bathed for many days. They were sweaty and mixed with a strange smell. Dean had to get close to them to smell it, but his sense of smell was so sensitive that he slightly frowned. These people were sitting under the shade of trees on the roadside. They seemed to know that the Randy company was not easy to deal with, so they didn't approach the company. They just waited on the roadside. No wonder the company's robot security couldn't expel them. Although the consortium was powerful and could easily kill a few people, they obviously didn't have the intention to kill a large number of poor people for Zhang Lanxin, a researcher. Moreover, Zhang Lanxin didn't report to the company, so she could only suffer. Dean glanced at them. There were more than 40 people. He didn't immediately go forward. Instead, he used the communicator to contact his secretary, Zhu Ying, and asked him to transfer the money to his account. After looking at the amount of the remittance, he walked toward the group of people under the shade of the street. Seeing someone coming over, the 7 people under the shade suddenly showed vigilance. They stopped fanning themselves, slowly stood up, and looked at Dean vigilantly. The other money collectors under the shade of the surrounding trees also stood up and stared at Dean with a bit of nervousness on their faces. "Are you all looking for Zhang Lanxin for money?" Dean faintly looked at the people in front of him. As they heard him mention Zhang Lanxin, the tension on the faces of the people around him suddenly disappeared and turned into anger. Among the 7 people, a middle-aged man with a strong figure stepped out. He seemed to be the representative of the crowd. He said angrily, "Who are you? Who are you to Zhang Lanxin?" Dean saw their aggressive attitude and said with a smile, "What? Do you want to behave atrociously in the Randy company? Don't you know where this place is?" The middle-aged man coldly snorted. "Who said we were going to cause trouble here? We're just waiting for someone and passing by. Why? Are people not allowed to stand on the roadside?" Dean smiled and said, "Don't get excited. I'm here to give you money on behalf of Zhang Lanxin's mother-in-law. She knows that you are in trouble, so she specifically asked me to come over to help you get through the difficulties." The people heard the words, and their faces were obviously relieved. "Who are you to Zhang Lanxin? Her son?" The middle-aged man looked at Dean. His face gradually turned cold. "We are all waiting for money. There are so many people. Do you think you can get so much money? How much do you need?" Dudian smiled. The middle-aged man and the people around him looked at each other. At this time, the others slowly came over and surrounded Dean. If an ordinary person saw this scene, they would think that they were robbers and would inevitably panic. But Dean looked calm. He just quietly watched them discuss. He even saw that the other side seemed to think that his attitude was good. Moreover, he was young and ready to ask for more. He could clearly see the winks that they were secretly giving him. "We have a total of 43 people here. Some of us need money for treatment. Some of our houses have collapsed, and some of our sons have died. All of us need money. We need at least 1 or 200,000 for each of us. Add it up to 8 or 9 million. Do you have enough?" The middle-aged man looked at Dudian and said in a cold voice. Dean slightly narrowed his eyes. 200,000 federal coins is equivalent to the income of a small rich family for half a year. You really dare to ask for it? The crowd saw that he seemed to be unwilling and suddenly began to talk. 200,000 is a lot for us, but what is it for rich people like you? Zhang Lanxin is an expert of Landy Company. I don't know how much money she earns every year. How could she not take out such a small amount of money? Do you think we are fools? Yes, you are too cold-blooded. We are so poor that we can't even eat. We are reluctant to give a little. You have so much money. Isn't it given to you by us? Isn't your food and clothing made by us commoners? You can save a little money, but it is enough for us to use for a lifetime. Dean smiled and was indifferent to the noise of the crowd. He didn't even blink his eyelids, even though the spittle was flying. The middle-aged man didn't expect the young man to be so calm. Knowing that it was meaningless to condemn him, he immediately raised his hand to signal everyone to be quiet. Soon, everyone stopped. Zhang Lanxin can earn so much money just by going on a TV show. We don't need much. If you can't give us the money, then let Zhang Lanxin come out and tell us. I don't believe that she has no money. The well-built middle-aged man said coldly. Dean smiled softly and said, "You are right. We can still take out this money. Isn't it just 8 or 9 million? I have 10 million here, as long as it can help everyone. The crowd was a little stunned. They didn't expect that Dean would agree after just a few words. For a moment, they were a little embarrassed, but soon they thought of the money in their hands. Their eyes suddenly became eager. They stared at Dean and wanted to grab it themselves. But the rule of law of the Federation was deep in their bones. They didn't dare to really do it. They just stared at the communicator in Dean's hand. I said, Grandma Longsheen is a good person. How can she be reluctant to give money? If she gave it earlier, we wouldn't have to waste time waiting here for so long. I'm dizzy from the sun. That's true. Little brother, give him money. Everyone urged with enthusiasm. Dean raised his hand slightly. After everyone was quiet, he said, Don't worry, everyone. It's hard for you to come here to ask for money. I'll give you the money. In addition, I'll call a few cars to send you back. I hope you can live a good life after you go back. Don't let Grandma Longsheen down. Yes, we will. Everyone agreed again and again. Dean immediately entered the company's internal authority on the communicator and mobilized a magnetic train. It was said to be a train, but it was slightly wider and longer than the old bus. The interior space was more comfortable. After everyone got on the train, Dean also went on the train. He set the train on autopilot and chose a route. Soon, the train started smoothly. Where's the money? Do you want to go with us? The middle-aged man saw that Dean also got on the train. He didn't look good and seemed to feel that something was wrong. Dean raised his hand slightly and said in a loud voice, Everyone, I'm going to transfer the money to everyone now. Sit down one by one. It's not good to mess up the order. Otherwise, don't blame me if someone doesn't get the money. The effect of these words was very good. There were some people who were still bewildered but also sat down. Dean immediately began to transfer the money according to the seat. Everyone saw that he really transferred the money. They were relieved and excited. It didn't take long for everyone on the train to receive Dean's transfer. Dean sat in the front of the train after the transfer was completed. He looked out of the window at the scenery. The speed of the train was very fast. It had already left the wealthy area along the city track and came to a remote town on the outskirts. Even a large Federation city like the First Vow City had barren areas, just that there weren't many of them. The train continued to move through 2 remote towns along the way. My house is here. Stop the train. Someone saw that the train was about to leave the town and quickly shouted. Dean didn't pay attention to it. When the man shouted even louder, Dean said, First send the people far away and then send the people near. Don't worry, just take it as a ride. While he was talking, the train had left the town. The man saw this and was a little angry, but he could only sit down silently. After the train drove out of the town, it came to the suburban road. There were 2 roads. One road had painted signs on it, while the other road looked a bit dilapidated. However, the train was heading towards the dilapidated road. At this time, many people had noticed that something was wrong. The middle-aged man stood up and glared at Dean. Where are you taking us? Dean also stood up and turned around. He looked at the crowd and said, Where are we going? Of course, to send you to die. As soon as the words came out, the whole train boiled. Everyone stood up and shouted in excitement. Some of them accused Dean. Some of them even cursed loudly. Several young people who were closest to Dean stood up and reached out to grab Dean. They wanted to hit him. Dean slightly lifted his leg and gently kicked the chest of the person in front of him. Only the sound of ribs breaking could be heard. The young man knocked down the people behind him and made them look like a turtle. They couldn't get up for a long time. What the hell do you want to do? The middle-aged man angrily shouted. Dean indifferently said, I'm sending you to die. You dare to kill? Do you want to die with us? If something happens to us, you won't live either. There is no law. Don't think that you are great because you are rich. Kill. Oh. Dean faintly smiled as he heard the angry shouts of the crowd. Of course, it is great to be rich. Otherwise, why do you work so hard to make money? Do you really think that your life is valuable? Although the law will protect you, but the law is also based on the words of the people. What do you think you are? Hearing his words, many people were a little flustered. After all, there were still people who were in awe of the powerful and upper-class people. The middle-aged man's face changed as he sneered. You have killed so many of our people. Do you think you won't be on the news? You won't be able to escape the death penalty. Then I don't need you dead people to do it." Dean smiled. The middle-aged man seemed to see that Dean didn't mean to intimidate him. He couldn't help but soften his tone. "I don't want the money. I will return the money to you. Stop the car." Chapter 11:21. Seeing Dean's indifferent expression, many people were scared and begged for mercy. "We have no enmity with you. Why do you want to kill us? I beg you to let me go. I don't want the money. I'll give it back to you, and I won't trouble you anymore. Let me off, please." The middle-aged man saw that begging for mercy didn't work, so he roared, "Don't think that killing people is not against the law because you are from a big company. There are so many of us. If something happens to us, no one can save you. Ignorant ants." Dean smiled indifferently. "When you forced an old man to give you money, you already deserve to die. There are few good people in this world. There are even fewer good people who have the ability to help others. Unfortunately, the so-called poor and lazy people like you are ignorant. You can't restrain your greedy nature, so there are fewer good people. So you will meet evil people like me. Unfortunately, when you meet me, there is no turning back." The middle-aged man roared, "Go to hell. Everyone, let's kill him first." Under his roar, many young men reacted from the panic and immediately pounced on Dean with ferocious faces. Dean looked indifferent. He lifted his foot and kicked the man. Someone approached from the side and was slapped in the face. His whole body turned around like a spinning top and crashed into the crowd. The people behind were frightened by his fierce strength. They stared in disbelief. Dean smiled indifferently. He raised his hand and slapped the automatic navigation system of the train. Electric sparks appeared, and the navigation system was smashed. Then he jumped and hit the metal plate of the train above his head. He stood on the edge of the hole. No one had ever seen such a terrifying, inhuman power. All of them were dumbfounded, their faces filled with shock. No one knew who suddenly shouted. The middle-aged man woke up and saw the end of the road in front of the train. There was a collapsed fault. His pupils shrank, and he screamed in horror. Dean jumped off the train. The navigation system of the train was damaged, but it continued to move forward without slowing down. After he jumped off the train, it rushed straight toward the highway fault and crashed. Dean slowly walked to the edge of the fault and saw the train rolling from the landslide under the fault to the cliff 100 meters below. The body of the train was already smoking. His eyes flashed, but he didn't go up to stab it. Instead, he floated away. The headquarters of the Terrace Financial Group. Located in the center of the city, it covered an area of tens of millions of square meters. It was the king of luxury houses. One had to know that every inch of land in the city center was worth an inch of gold. Even a residential house of 100 square meters would cost millions of federal dollars. What was the concept of tens of millions of square meters? It was equivalent to the core of Dujon City, and it was all included in the garden of the Terrace Financial Group's headquarters. Just this piece of land alone was worth hundreds of billions. Even the federal government in the capital city had moved to a second-tier area. This was the domineering nature of the four consortiums. Money was perhaps just a number to them. After all, the Terrace Financial Group was responsible for printing money for the Federation. Money? No one knew how much money the Terrace Financial Group had, but they knew that the Terrace Financial Group's businesses were spread throughout the Federation. The products produced were sold to millions of households. Whether you were a man or a woman, the elderly or the children, you would use the Terrace Financial Group's products in all aspects. At this moment, in the tallest technology building in the Terrace Financial Group's villa complex, the dim light shrouded every corner of the room. There was only one huge room on the top floor. It was extremely spacious, like a palace, but it was simpler than a palace. There weren't too many luxurious decorations. There were only holes embedded in every corner of the room, emitting a faint light. The floor was not a floor, but a transparent mirror. Dressed in a black and gold robe like that of a priest, Black Elodie slowly walked in from outside the room. His feet stepped on the transparent floor, as if he was walking in midair. Beneath the transparent floor was not the image of the next floor, but a deep and vast darkness. There were specks of light, like the stars in the universe. Black Elodie's body was perfectly straight, but his head was slightly lowered. With every step he took, he would look at the area less than 5 meters in front of his feet, not daring to go any further. He just walked step by step, silently remembering in his heart. When he took the 12th step, he immediately stopped, then bowed slightly, and said in an extremely respectful tone, "Black Elodie greets the core deity. What orders do you have for me?" A young, yet extremely indifferent and condescending tone came from above Black Elodie's head. "That demon has caused trouble again. Go and clean up the mess." Black Elodie was slightly stunned and said doubtfully, "The one that was sent to the Landy Company? He dares to cause trouble instead of staying in the company obediently? He did it on purpose. He wanted to see the bottom line of my tolerance." There was no trace of emotion in the indifferent voice. "Go." Black Elodie's heart tightened as he quickly bowed. "Yes, Lord God." After saying that, he bowed slightly and slowly turned around to leave. Before he left, he glanced in front of him from the corner of his eyes and saw an incomparably dazzling light. It was as if a god was emitting light. He walked out of the room quietly, and when the alloy door slowly closed, he felt that the air was much lighter. He breathed a sigh of relief, and his eyes flickered slightly. He said to himself in his heart, "It's that demon again. Lord God is so concerned about him. What is it for?" Dean casually called a car and went back to the company after entering the town. Dean used his X-ray vision to scan each floor. He found Zhang Lanxin's figure and went straight to the top floor of the laboratory. The door of the laboratory opened as Dean entered and saw Zhang Lanxin, Kong Ji, and 4 other experts who were busy with the experiment. They were in a group. Once the project was successful, they would get great fame and benefits. Noticing that someone had come in, many people turned to look. They frowned as they saw Dean, but ignored him and continued to work. Zhang Lanxin put down the chemicals in her hand as she saw Dean come back. She quickly walked over and whispered, "Did they leave?" "All gone." Dean used a different tone when he said gone. Zhang Lanxin didn't hear the difference. She was relieved and quickly asked, "How much did they ask for? A lot?" Dean smiled and showed her the transfer form. "It's not much. 200,000 per person. A total of more than 8 million. I can afford it." "So much?" Zhang Lanxin was a little surprised, but soon became annoyed. She lowered her head and sulked. "Grandma Lan Xin, don't take it to heart. It's just a small amount of money. They promised that they won't come again." "But Grandma, you don't have to care about these people anymore. There are countless poor people in the Federation. If you can't help them, they will become ungrateful wolves." Zhang Lanxin nodded heavily and said, "I know. I've seen through this matter clearly. I won't do such a stupid thing again. But child, your money." She thought for a moment and solemnly said, "I'll return it to you." Dean smiled. "We will talk about this later. Grandma, you are busy with the experiment. I won't bother you." Zhang Lanxin felt the dissatisfied eyes of others. She didn't say anything more. "Then you can look around here. If there is anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me. I'm going to work." Chapter 1122. Dean wandered around the laboratory for a moment and then left. He went to an empty laboratory, pulled a chair next to the bookshelf, and flipped through the information inside. With his authority, he could enter these laboratories that were not open at will. Compared to reading carefully in a laboratory where there were people, he could be more casual here. It was just that he could not understand most of the information here. However, he memorized all these formulas. Once he learned the formulas and what the nouns represented, he would be able to master them immediately. He found a notebook and wrote down the things he didn't understand. Then he went to the dining room in advance and ordered a meal. After Zhang Lanxin and the experts from the laboratory came down to eat, Dean immediately ordered a meal. At this time, Zhang Lanxin came to the dining room. She noticed Dean sitting in a conspicuous position under the reminder of Kong Ji. She was stunned for a moment and then directly came over. "Little Qin, this time thanks to you." Zhang Lanxin's face was full of gratitude and very sincere. Dean pulled a chair and invited them to sit down, saying, "It's a small matter. Grandma Lanshin doesn't need to thank me. I've heard that 9 million is not a small number even for us. These people are really ruthless. They are simply evil wolves. They say that the poor are pitiful, and that there must be something hateful about them. They are absolutely right. Although Kong Ji was old, his tone was filled with righteous indignation like a young man. If Zhang Lanxin didn't tell him that Dudian had shown her the transfer list, he wouldn't have believed that Dudian was telling the truth. He hated the debt collectors even more after he confirmed that Dudian was telling the truth. Dean smiled and didn't deny it. Although 9 million wasn't a big deal to him, he couldn't act too indifferent. After the two ordered dinner, the three of them ate and chatted. Little Qin, I heard that you were studying the experiment and preparing to apply for a research project. If there is anything I can help you with, just tell me. Zhang Lanxin had been looking for an opportunity. After Dean finished dinner, she was afraid that he would leave, so she quickly said. Dean was waiting for this opportunity. Even if she didn't speak, he would take the initiative to speak. He didn't show too much joy, just smiled and said, I do want to apply for a project from the company. It's not that I don't have a task when they send me here, but my qualifications are too shallow, and I don't understand a lot of things, including the words of you experts. I still need to learn. Zhang Lanxin and Kong Ji knew that Dudian was very eager to learn. Zhang Lanxin happily said, I can teach you if you don't understand anything. Yes, you can ask me anything you don't understand. Kong Ji said with a smile in his eyes. He was very optimistic about Dean. Dudian scratched his head. Will I disturb you and waste your energy? It's okay. It's nothing. Zhang Lanxin quickly said, for fear that Dean would refuse and would not be able to find an opportunity to repay. Seeing this, Dean no longer refused but agreed. In his heart, he said, some people get help from others, but covet more help. Some people get a little kindness from others, but feel uncomfortable and try to repay. Unfortunately, such people are only a small part. After the two finished eating, Dean took out his notebook and asked for advice. The two saw Dean write down a lot of things in the notebook and were surprised. They didn't expect Dean to be so diligent. In their hearts, they appreciated him more and were happy to give him guidance. Little Qin, these are not systematic. At your age, you shouldn't have studied as a graduate student, right? Zhang Lanxin looked at the notebook and quickly saw the level of Dean's knowledge. Dean nodded. I just graduated from college. At that time, I only played around, and my results were average. Zhang Lanxin smiled and comforted. It's not too late to learn now. I'll teach you from the beginning. Wait for me to go back tonight, and after I finish the experiment tomorrow, you can come to me. Dean was surprised. Thank you, Grandma Lan Xin, but Grandma, you are old. Don't stay up late. It's okay. I can still eat. Zhang Lanxin laughed. After the two left together, Dean also packed up his things and returned to his residence. Looking at the evening news, he soon found a news about a car crash. The location and the pictures were taken. It was the car that was used for his funeral. Zhang Lanxin will go back in the evening to sort out the study plan for me. She should have no time to pay attention to these news. These experts usually only pay attention to the news in their own industry. Occasionally, when they have free time, they will look at other news. For the time being, there is no need to worry about anything. Moreover, there is no report on the name of the deceased. Dean looked at the news. He only saw the flattened appearance of the train, and the passengers' faces were full of blood, but it was blurred. Dean believed that Zhang Lanxin should not associate it with those debt collectors. Even if she did, it would not matter. From the news, this incident was defined as an accident caused by the train's navigation failure. It seems that the consortium is quite indulgent to me. Dean said in his heart, they know that I am a demon and that I have killed so many of your people, but they cover for me. They can easily investigate the real reason for the train crash. Dean's eyelids slightly narrowed, flashing a cold light. Although more than 40 people were ordinary civilians, but the Federation was a society ruled by law. It was almost the same as the old era, or even more strict than the old era. Murder? Robbery? All of them would be arrested. There was no underworld in the Federation, only the police. The law was strict. This was a humanistic society. Even if it was a multimillionaire who killed people, they would pay with their life. Occasionally, in the news, rich people would be arrested and sentenced for violating innocent girls. The law protects every citizen, so the debt collectors dared to be so arrogant. As the saying goes, even if you are rich, even if you are powerful, do you dare to kill me? However, standing at the top of the society, the terrorist consortium gave Dean the answer. Yes, they dare. The murder of more than 40 people was defined as an accident. Dean deliberately didn't kill them, and even deliberately left his fingerprints when he smashed the navigator. It was to test the energy and reaction of the terrorist consortium. Now it seemed that the terrorist consortium could cover the sky with one hand in Duyo City. Even the scope was not limited to Duyo City, but more than half of the Federation. The consortium didn't send anyone to warn me. It seems that this small matter didn't even touch 1/10 of their tolerance. The more tolerance they have, the more they have. They gave me the highest authority so that I can learn a lot of esoteric knowledge. It seems that they are helping me, but if they really want to help me, then they should directly identify themselves, unless there is something difficult to say. From all the phenomena, Dean felt that the goodwill of the terrorist consortium had little to do with helping him. There must be a purpose. It was late at night while he was thinking. Dean sighed softly. This feeling was like a leaf floating in the sea, and it could be destroyed at any time. He couldn't figure out when the wind would come, but the wind would come eventually. He made up his mind to first learn the knowledge, and then solve the problem of his heart. If it wasn't for the burden of his heart being too low, he felt that his body could erupt with unimaginable power. Perhaps the transformation of his body by Crimson Moon was far beyond Crimson Moon's expectations. If I can erupt with the power of the king, then even if the terrorist consortium wants to kill me, I should be able to protect myself. The strongest weapon they have, besides nuclear bombs, should be laser weapons. Dean thought in his heart. It should be impossible to use nuclear weapons to attack him. After all, he was in the Federation. It was better to let him go than to use nuclear weapons to destroy a demon. Chapter 11:23. Time flew by. Dean read materials by himself during the day and looked for Zhang Lanxin to tutor him in the evening. Kangji occasionally taught him some obscure biological knowledge. Dean's knowledge level was rapidly improving. Thanks to his photographic memory and diligent self-study, he made rapid progress. Many things were taught by Zhang Lanxin once, but Dean completely mastered them. His amazing IQ made the two old experts speechless. 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. Dean felt that it was almost time, so he applied to the company for the Walking Dead experiment project. Faster than he expected, the company didn't let him wait for long. The project was approved that night. The first batch of investment funds reached 50 million, and he was promoted to project director. He could select other experts of the company to participate in the experiment. After the news spread, Dudian immediately became a sweet potato in the eyes of many experts. Although some people were jealous, but on the surface, they were still very polite to Dudian and even did not hesitate to compliment him, hoping to be selected by Dudian and pulled into his experimental project. After all, the first batch of funds for the experimental project was so high. Obviously, the company and the consortium had high hopes. Moreover, they heard that Dean's research had not made any progress for many years. Once the experiment was successful, it would absolutely be a shocking work. They would also jump to become top experts and be included in textbooks for hundreds of years. Even if the experiment failed, it would have little impact on them. The main person in charge was Dean. I heard that Qin Mo is the illegitimate son of a board member of the consortium. If he is not an illegitimate son, how can the consortium allow the company to mess around like this? This is not research. It is clearly burning money. A young man in his 20s as the experimental project director, people will laugh to death if they say it out. It's simply nonsense. Previously, the company gave him the highest authority to participate in our experiment. Anyway, he just wants to look at it and doesn't understand anything. Now, they actually throw money for him to play. They really treat science as a child's play. It's just a game for the rich. Why do you take it so seriously? Hey, we still do our own experiment. It is estimated that when his experiment fails, it won't be long before he will be transferred by the consortium. Coming here to do the experiment may just be a whim of the other party. Many of the experts in the company with level 1 authority were discussing this in private. This matter even reached the ears of the ordinary experts, and it became a topic of conversation after a meal. Dean faintly smiled as he heard the discussion. Although these people didn't dare to talk in front of him, but his hearing was so keen that he could cover the entire building. Although the building was soundproof, but his magic marks gave him the ability of extrasensory audiovisual. Even if it was a completely sealed soundproof room, he could still hear it clearly. It's not just you who can't figure out what the consortium is thinking. Even I can't figure it out. Dean smiled in his heart. After the meal, he thought about the names of the experts who would form the experimental project. There were only 4 of them: Zhang Lanxin, Kong Ji, Chu Huiru, and another Chinese man called Malone were the only ones who weren't jealous or ridiculed in the discussions. After receiving Dudian's invitation, the 4 quickly came to the laboratory that Dudian had applied for. Chu Huiru was surprised and asked, "Chinamo, do you want to invite me to participate in your experimental project?" "Yes, do you want to?" Dudian smiled. Chu Huiru thought for a moment. "No problem. Anyway, I don't have any experimental project recently. I just want to do some small research. I have time. I don't have any problem," Malone said. "Little Chin, both of them are experts in undead research. They have many years of research experience. You have found the right person to find them. But you have invited me and Kong Ji to participate. We aren't good at this." Zhang Lanxin was worried. Dudian laughed. "Grandma Lan Xian, you and Master Kong have profound insights in genetics and neurology. You will certainly be able to play a different role in undead research. Moreover, you have been studying monsters for many years. Maybe you will be able to find common ground between undead and monsters and make new breakthroughs in the experiment." Zhang Lanxin was flabbergasted. "Is it really possible? Let's give it a try," Dudian said. Kongji thought for a moment. "What you said is reasonable. In that case, we will give it a try. But little Chin, why did you choose to do this research? You should know that it is basically impossible to cure undead. The probability of failure is extremely high. In case of failure, so much money. It doesn't matter. The consortium has money. We can afford it," Dudian said, but the smile on his face had disappeared. Kong Ji and Zhang Lanxin looked at each other. They were relieved as they thought of the rumors outside. If Dudian was really the illegitimate child of a director, then it wouldn't be a big deal if he lost money. At most, they would be criticized. If it was them, then they would be discredited and driven out of the company. With such a resume, other companies wouldn't dare to use them. They didn't refute. Dudian immediately signed the experimental confidentiality contract with the 4 people and officially started the project. The funds for the experiment had been transferred to Dudian's company account. He could use the company's internal shopping channel to buy materials needed for the experiment. For example, undead for research only cost 50,000 federal coins. It was half cheaper than the market price. He bought a large number of 10 undead. There were different kinds of undead: men, women, children, infected undead of the Federation, and old undead. The next day, Dudian, Zhang Lanxin, and the other 4 people held a meeting to discuss the experimental plan. After 3 days of continuous discussion, they finally formulated the experimental guidelines. Zhang Lanxin and the other 3 people took over most of the work of the experiment. Dudian didn't participate. He was alone in another research. He had the identity of the director. Although others felt strange, they didn't think much about it. Anyway, Dudian was the son of a rich family who came to play. They could take this opportunity to study undead. Even if they failed, they could accumulate valuable experimental experience. Dudian moved a set of instruments to his office in the laboratory room. Studying undead was just a cover for him. Although he was eager to find a way to cure undead, but in the past 3 months, he learned more from the company's experimental data. He knew how difficult it was. It was not something that he could pull Zhang Lanxin and the others to complete in just a few months. For him, The priority was to leave here and restore his freedom. In the future, there would be opportunities to slowly do research. Chapter 1124. Before preparing for the experiment, Dean used X-ray to check every corner of the office. After confirming that there was no monitoring, he turned off the computer system that recorded the experiment. Then he turned off the synchronous networking function of many instruments and turned these instruments into primitive individual instruments. Without the synchronous recording function, although the instruments would be weakened in data comparison and analysis, but once connected to the network, there was a possibility of being stolen. In this way, even if the terrorist consortium can use some authority to control the network, or if there's a master hacker behind them, they won't be able to steal my research. Dean moved all the instruments that needed to be connected to the network out of the office, leaving only the instruments that could be used without the network. Although this would increase the difficulty of his research, it was worth it. This office is my territory. They can't monitor it. I don't know how long they can endure before they come to me. Dean's mouth curved into a smile as he immediately began to study. He extracted his own blood, hair, bones, and various organs for dissecting and testing from shallow to deep. After the body data was analyzed, he used the company's channel to buy the demon warriors cultivated by the Federation. They were at different stages, from hunters to pioneers. As for the Dominator and Abyss-level demon warriors, the price was more than 100 million. He could only wait for the second batch of funds from the consortium. When these demon warriors were sent to the laboratory, their bodies were wrapped in chains and injected with special potions. They could only exert the strength of ordinary people and became Dean's experimental subjects. Zhang Lanxin and others were surprised to see the 3 demon warriors bought by Dean. They asked Dean, but Dean only said that his research was useful. The 4 of them didn't say anything. After all, Dean was the director and initiator of the project. He had the right to allocate the funds. They could only borrow the instruments in the laboratory to do their own research. The 3 demon warriors were tied to the iron frame of the office. They seemed to know their tragic fate, but no one resisted. Their eyes were filled with great despair. They seemed to have lost the will to live. Dean disassembled them one by one. Brain tissue, heart, magic marks, blood, and other parts. In his hands, they seemed to be lifeless machines. While studying these demon warriors, he started the network function of the instrument. Anyway, the company knew that he'd bought the demon warriors for experiments. Even if the consortium knew the body data of the demon warriors through the network function, it was nothing to Dean. After all, these demon warriors were products of the Federation. They should have been on the experimental bench of the major consortia. After the instrument was connected to the network, Dean's research speed was greatly improved. Many data were automatically analyzed by the system. He didn't have to slowly analyze and record them one by one. This is the picture of magic marks and humans getting along. Dudian saw the physical state of the 3 through the genetic level. The hunter's DNA was mixed with a small amount of magic mark's DNA. It was about 1/10 of the magic mark's DNA. The color was like a colorful spiral staircase. Just 1/10 of the magic mark's DNA had greatly changed the hunter's original human DNA. The most intuitive manifestation of this change was that it gave the hunter power beyond that of an ordinary person. In addition, when the adrenal glands were secreted, it would stimulate the body. The magic mark DNA in the body would cover the human DNA in a short period of time, thus replacing the body with a monster-like body. But this state could not be maintained for a long time. When a magic mark DNA was covered, the cells would divide rapidly. A person's cell division was limited. When the division reached a certain level, it would decline. Stimulating the power of the magic mark was equivalent to overdraft life. Seeing this, Dean knew why the hunters in Sylvia's world died at most in their 70s or 80s. Although they were modified by the magic mark DNA, and the cell division speed was much slower and the number of times increased. But the years of fighting were constantly consuming their life. Assuming that the lifespan of an ordinary human was about 80 years, the lifespan of a hunter was 150 years. But the years of fighting made their lifespan not much different from that of an ordinary person. They even aged faster and died earlier than ordinary people. In contrast, the DNA of the Limitless was mixed with the Magic Mark DNA. When the body was stimulated into the Magic Body, the coverage of the Magic Mark DNA reached 1/3. This was why when the hunters stimulated the power of the Magic Mark, the appearance was similar to that of a human, but the pupil changed color, the fangs grew, the nails became longer, and so on. But when the Limitless was stimulated the power of the Magic Mark, the body would change, such as the arms turned into the claws of a monster, becoming neither human nor beast. When it came to the Pioneer, half of the DNA in the body was mixed with the Magic Mark DNA. During the battle, the body would change greatly. The arms turned into beast claws or extended tails, horns on the head, and so on. The manifestation was extremely obvious. It was also called the Magic Body. From their experiments, it could be seen that the later the Magic Mark DNA and the human DNA were more closely combined. Dean thought of the scenes of the strong at various stages of the Magic Mark fighting. Once in the Abyss, once they entered the Magic Body, they would basically turn into a monster, and no human shadow could be seen. Although the face still had the outline of a human, the eyes and the skin on the face were not the structure of a human, or the eyes, or the gelatinous or scaly skin. The DNA of the Pioneer is still a double-stranded molecular structure, but mine is a triangular structure. Each side of the triangular structure is composed of different DNA. One side is the human part of myself, one side is the origami factor, and the other side is the white factor. It's like the genetic structure of the ice worm. Dean didn't know whether the other Abyss was like this, but he felt that the possibility was very small. However, what made him feel strange was that the higher the physique of a magic scar warrior, the more Magic Mark DNA would take up. However, the part of his human genes in his body was very strong. It was not swallowed by the origami factor, nor was it covered by the icy magic insects. In addition, his Magic Mark DNA, such as the splitter, the tortoise shell, and other Magic Mark DNA, did not appear in his DNA structure. It seemed that they did not exist in his body. He repeatedly checked, but did not find the DNA of these magic marks. He could only give up for the time being and began to scan his heart. The god's fetus in his heart was beating along with his heart. The heart wrapped around it, as if it was its warm bed. However, it was also as if this heart was the god's fetus heart. Every time it beat, the god's fetus body would stretch as if it was breathing. When it is born, it may be the time of my death. Dean's eyes slightly sank. This was a time bomb in his body, and he did not know when it would hatch. He carefully extracted part of the heart tissue, so as to avoid stimulating the heart and the divine fetus inside. It was just a little bit of tissue. For him, although it was a little painful, it was still bearable. After all, his physique was not that of an ordinary person. Chapter 1125. This part really is the pure structure of the origami. Dean's eyes turned cold as the heart tissue was analyzed by the instrument. The pure flesh and blood of the origami had become the core organ of his body and supplied blood to his body. It involved all aspects of the body, but unexpectedly didn't have any repulsive properties. It was like implanting a beast's limb into a human's body. The tissue around the limb would die, but there was no such situation around his heart. The flesh and blood of origami seemed to be integrated with his body. Through the research, Dean found that the flesh and blood of origami seemed to be a collection of origami genes in his body. The origami gene was too powerful, so it wasn't completely integrated into his body. Instead, it was gathered in the form of a heart. This meant that as long as he could find an organ that could replace the heart, then he could remove the golden heart. He could also embed the flesh and blood of origami into other parts of his body, such as fingers or wings, to increase his combat ability. The embryo in the heart seemed to be very young, and the structure of the embryo was very unstable. Dean estimated that he wouldn't be in any danger in a short period of time. He used various instruments to continue the in-depth research. In the following days, he bought a variety of materials from the company's internal shopping channel. There were different kinds of undeads and different kinds of monsters. He also bought a batch of insects. Half a month later, he also bought some plants that were contaminated by nuclear radiation. There were also some strange semi-biological plants. He didn't know the reason why these semi-biological plants grew flesh-like tissues. When they were injured, they would bleed bright red blood or dark green blood. The blood composition could be tested, although this kind of plant was rare in the post-disaster world. But the Federation had searched for hundreds of years and had already found countless of them. There were detailed introductions in textbooks. Dean thought of the forest of despair that he encountered when he first stepped into the abyss. There were huge plants lurking in the ground, waiting for the opportunity to hunt the creatures on the surface. Whether it was a human or a powerful monster that stepped into the forest, they would become food on the plate and be digested without leaving any bones. In the old era, there were plants like Venus flytrap that would passively prey on things that touched it. However, the way that Dean met the roots and vines of the forest of despair was extremely fierce. It was as if they were conscious. For Dean, living plants were not so shocking. Zhang Lanxin and others were somewhat stunned and confused by Dean's series of actions. They didn't know what he was doing. He was obviously studying the undead, but he found a lot of messy things. Was he trying to find the common ground of the undead from these monsters and plants, and find another way to solve the problem of the undead? They could only think of this explanation. Although they felt that it was whimsical, there was no way to dissuade Dean. In the highest building of the Terrace Consortium's manor, dressed in formal clothes, Blackheldian lowered his head modestly and slowly walked into this star-like room. Under his feet were the deep darkness and the vast stars. The world around him also seemed to be infinitely far away, as if he was really in the vast universe. It was not his first time to come here, and he was not as shocked as he was at the beginning, silently counting his steps in his mind. Lord God, the demon boy you asked me to take care of has applied for another batch of research fees from the consortium. Do you need approval? Black Slody stopped and asked respectfully. Yes. The voice was extremely indifferent, but there is a kind of majesty that overlooks all living beings. Black Slody respectfully said, Lord God, you asked us to monitor the demon boy, but he is doing experiments in his office every day. Moreover, he has destroyed all the monitoring equipment in the office. The instruments are not connected to the network. We can only speculate what he is doing through his consumption channels. But his behavior is a bit strange. It seems like he is playing around. I suspect that he may be deliberately consuming us or testing our patience. There was no sound after he finished. While Black Elodie was feeling nervous, the extremely indifferent voice slowly said, he just thinks he's smart and thinks that he could deceive others by destroying the surveillance. He doesn't know that he's just burying his head in the sand. Mortals are so stupid. Black Slody was startled. Is he secretly planning something? He is borrowing the high-end equipment of a laboratory to study his own body. It seems that he is very confused about his own body. It also shows how backward the society of the Demon Empire is. It can't even withstand a single blow. That indifferent voice carried a trace of arrogance, seemingly very disdainful. Black Slody bowed his head and laughed. Lord God is right. How can the civilization of the Demon Empire be compared with us? They're just a group of ignorant, primitive people who have been blinded by power. If we didn't find the remnants of civilization from the old era, then I reckon that they would still be living a primitive life. The demon race has been fighting frequently recently. It seems that there are some unusual movements. You must send someone to find out the reason. Yes. Go back. Lowering his head respectfully, Black turned around and slowly left the room. When the door was closed behind him, he finally let out a sigh of relief. However, his expression became a bit solemn. Calmly looking at the perforated monitor in front of him, he slowly walked out. 2 months passed. When Dean came out of the laboratory, he felt a sense of resurrection. When the sun shone on his body from the window, he felt that his stiff body seemed to have regained some vitality. In the past 2 months, the progress of Zhang Lanxin and others' experiments was extremely slow. They had failed many times, but the results were very few. It was a blow to the four of them. Fortunately, Dean didn't blame them. Instead, he comforted them. If it was another laboratory, they would have declared the project a failure. But Dean was still persevering. His persistence not only moved Zhang Lanxin and the others, but also surprised him. After 2 months of in-depth research, he had studied many kinds of life. Originally, he wanted to compare them with his own body, origami factor, and magic mark gene. But in the process of research, it was as if he had opened a magnificent new world. He saw the richness of life and even the essence of life. Now, if he wanted to, he could even do brain replacement surgery. He could change the brain tissue into another body so that life could continue in the new body. Such a top-notch surgery could only be performed by the top medical experts in the Federation. Moreover, the failure rate was extremely high. Even many tycoons did not dare to attempt it easily. They would only take the risk when they were really on the brink of death. Chapter 1126. In Dean's view, when life evolved to the limit, all the potential was stimulated, and it was enough to be called a god. The so-called god had endless life, omnipotent power, and could destroy the world. Even nuclear weapons couldn't kill them. Once the potential of life is played to the extreme, it would be enough to become such an existence. Dean saw the possibility through the research. For example, the ice worm had a long lifespan and could adapt to all kinds of harsh environments. It could survive no matter how powerful the toxins, the lack of oxygen, or the lack of food. The only way to kill it was to freeze it at absolute zero or obliterate it with high temperature. Under absolute zero, its body could be destroyed, but once it left absolute zero, it would recover again, and the high temperature would be even more thorough, annihilating it into dust. This was also the reason why the nuclear explosion in the old era repelled the ice worm. Compared to the ice worm, origami seemed to be its natural enemy. The cells of origami had omnipotent devouring ability, and it could completely devour and digest the tough cells of the ice worm. Through research, he found that in addition to devouring the ice worm, the origami could also devour other life forms and turn them into its own food, including plants. It could be described as a super omnivore. Even rocks, soil, it could extract nutrients from them. It could eat anything. In Dean's view, if the abilities of these two races were combined, it would be invincible. It would be like a god. And his body contained these two types of genes. This was probably the crystallization of Crimson Moon's research, and it was also what she thought of as God. All along, I thought that the magic mark brought power to the body, but I didn't expect it to be so. Dean's eyes flashed. The past 2 months of research had allowed him to see more details. The relationship between the magic mark and the human body was like the relationship between the key and the treasure. The magic mark was just a key, and it stimulated the body's potential and exerted the magic mark's ability. In fact, the potential of the cells was extremely broad, and it could be described as ever-changing. Different magic marks brought different abilities, just like different keys to open the same treasure house, but each door was different, so the released power was also different. The magic mark was just a primer. The source of power still came from the body. This was just like humans. Different viruses would lead to different diseases and different changes. However, if it was a rock, there would not be such changes. The root of the problem was that humans had the ability to adapt to such changes. When he was studying before, he did not see his own magic mark genes in the gene chain. But later on, he discovered that these magic mark genes had long been swallowed by the origami factor, and the door they opened had been permanently opened. This meant that even if he stripped off his magic mark, he still had the ability to do so. Generally, hunters and even pioneers would lose their original magic marks once they stripped them of their magic marks and replaced them with new ones. This was because the hidden door in their body was not strong enough to open it by themselves. In short, It was like the door was open halfway, and then the key was pulled out and the door would automatically close. However, the desolate god Jean had melted this key, completely embedding it within the hole of the door, causing the door to be unable to close. This discovery was of great significance to Dean. Before, he did not dare to absorb too many magic marks, not only because he was afraid that his power would be too complicated, but also because he was afraid that his body would be damaged. Just like a glutton, it was inevitable that he would eventually die of the dissection. But now that he knew the reason, he could unscrupulously absorb different magic marks and use these magic marks to stimulate the many abilities of his body. However, when he saw the possibility of becoming a god, this surprise was not so big. In his view, this was the ability that would naturally be mastered after the life had progressed to a certain level. Perhaps after surpassing the king level, he would have such an ability. Without the help of magic marks, he could rely on the tempering and control of the genes to extend the different abilities of the genes. Every cell in the body was like his own fingers and could be controlled and trained at will. The hand could be clenched into a fist, and it could also be used as a sword. The changes of cells were far more complicated than the 5 fingers, and they could be ever-changing. If one wanted to condense X-ray vision, they could condense it. If one wanted to grow scales, they could grow scales. At this point, he was no longer a human nor a beast. He could turn into a beast, a giant, a rock, or a piece of water. In Dean's view, this was the evolution of life that had been tempered to the extreme, that is God. These sounded like fantasies, but it was precisely the possibility that Dean saw with the most sophisticated high-end instruments. If his research data was published online, it would be enough to shake the scientific and technological community of the Federation and shatter the worldview of countless people. However, Dean never believed that things that couldn't be explained by science and technology didn't exist. Not to mention that the things he saw brought about this conjecture, and it happened that scientific instruments helped him to see it. Technology and knowledge were only tools to help humans understand the universe. Technology couldn't explain it, but it didn't mean that it didn't exist. Existence was the truth. If technology couldn't explain it, then it could only mean that technology was too backward. The magic mark is like a phantom. The process of releasing the power of the magic mark is like the human body copying the phantom of the magic mark. At the hunter stage, one can only copy the power of the magic mark. At the abyss walker stage, one can completely copy the power of the magic mark and turn into a monster. But after all, this is just a copy. Once the original painting of the magic mark is gone, it will lose its power. But how can the real strong rely on copying? The kings of the empire didn't copy, but the magic mark took over their brain. It was like a painter who copied a famous work, but was completely obsessed with it and forgot himself. In the empire, the first warriors weren't magic mark's warriors, but the witches. They implanted the flesh and blood of the monster into their body. It was similar to copying. However, the witches gradually disappeared. They weren't replaced by the magic mark's warriors. There seems to be a gap in the middle. Perhaps there was a warrior who relied on their own evolution to show extraordinary power. Dean's eyes flashed. The top secret information and chronicles of the giant wall flashed in his mind. This possibility was not impossible, but if there was, it meant that the water of the empire was deeper than he imagined. If there was a warrior who relied on their own evolution to surpass the strength of ordinary people, then why did they disappear? Unfortunately, after all, he didn't come into contact with the core secrets of the empire. What he saw today was based on the detection of the instruments in the Federation. Chapter 11:27. Dean wanted to explore the hidden secrets of the empire, but he also knew that he couldn't protect himself with his current strength, let alone go to the empire. But the harvest brought by the research was huge. He saw the shadow of God. If he saw it, there was a possibility to do it. Using magic marks to stimulate the body is just a drop in the bucket. It can't stimulate all the potential. I need to find a more suitable and efficient way through research. Dean thought, although he saw the way, but it was very difficult to take this step. Throughout the ages, he was by no means the first to see this possibility. For example, Burrow, Crimson Moon, and their research showed that they also saw such a realm of life. It was like a human seeing the sun, but to climb the sun, it was more than 10,000 times more difficult. After a short rest, Dean continued to dive into the new experiment. This time he didn't study himself, so he connected all the instruments in the office to greatly improve the efficiency of the research. If the consortium discovers my research through the instrument network, they won't understand what I'm researching. Instead, they will think that they know my secrets, but they won't know that I've disconnected from the network to study my body. Dean thought. After a few days of research, he no longer closed the office and devoted himself to his own experiment. At this time, the experimental data that he had read before played a role. There were some experts who tried to stimulate the potential of life, such as electric stimulation, nerve pain stimulation, and so on. For Dean, nerve pain stimulation obviously didn't have a big effect. Since he woke up, he had fought countless battles and suffered countless injuries. It could be seen that the effect of this method was too poor. He could only choose to use electric stimulation. He used the company's internal channels to buy new materials. There were undead, monsters, special bloodthirsty plants, and young men and women of different ages. These ordinary people without skills were sold at a low price. The relatively high price of ordinary people were trained as maids or had special talents. Zhang Lanxin and others weren't surprised to see undeads and monsters being transported over, but they were surprised to see 4 young men and women of different ages. Chu Huiru quickly asked Dadian, "Qin Mo, has your experiment reached the live experiment stage?" Dean vaguely said, "Almost, I have some confidence." The 4 of them were shocked. They didn't expect that Dean would be able to figure out the results in just 2 months. Thinking of this, the 4 of them were excited and looking forward to it. Although they felt that the possibility of Dean's success was very low, they couldn't help but have a glimmer of hope. When the 4 young men and women who were transported oversaw their surroundings and the conversation between Zhang Lanxin and the other 3, their faces turned pale with fright, and their eyes were filled with despair. However, even the kind and benevolent Zhang Lanxin did not plead for them when she saw them. She only showed some pity. This was not because Zhang Lanxin had seen through people's hearts because of the debt collection, but because she had seen this kind of thing many times before. Moreover, she had personally conducted experiments on living people. To her, this was work, and it did not involve any other emotions. Moreover, the company had already told them about the origins of these people. They were all volunteers that the company had spent money to recruit from society. The experiment continued. 1 week later, suddenly 2 people came to Dean's laboratory. Zhang Lanxin and others who were busy with their experiments were shocked when they saw the 2 people. They quickly stopped their experiments, took off their silicone gloves, and hurried to greet the 2 people politely. "Boss, Mr. Wendy." "Hello, Mr. Wendy." Zhang Lanxin and others called out in succession. The one they called Mr. Wendy was standing on the left. He was slender, wearing a black suit, wearing an expensive mechanical watch made by a master. He had golden hair, although he looked more than 40 years old, but he was very handsome. He was a very handsome uncle. Next to him was a burly man with short hair. His eyes were like lightning. He was Chinese, wearing a sleeveless blue shirt. His muscles were bulging, and he looked like a bodyguard. Zhang Lanxin and others directly ignored this person. But the next moment, they found that the CEO of the Randy Company, who was also the biggest boss of the company, just smiled, and then with a bit of politeness and modesty, said to the burly man next to him, "The person is inside. Please wait a moment." Then he told Zhang Lanxin, "Call Qin Mo out." Zhang Lanxin and others were very keen in observing people's expressions. They were shocked and deeply looked at the burly man who looked like a bodyguard. 2 words emerged in their mind: consortium. Only people from the terrorist consortium could make Winnie so polite. Otherwise, as the boss of the Randy Company, even in the face of the directors of the Locke Consortium and the Milan Consortium, he didn't need to be so humble. "Looking for me?" Dean came out of the laboratory. When the two came to the building, he had noticed them. He also used his ultrasonic hearing to hear their casual conversation. It seemed that the people from the headquarters of the terrorist consortium had come to look for him. It seemed that they wanted to take him away. Zhang Lanxin saw Dean come out, so she didn't go forward. She asked Wendy, "Boss, why are you looking for Lil Qin? It's none of your business here. You go out first." Wendy slightly shook his head. His attitude was somewhat cold. Zhang Lanxin, Chu Huiru, and the others looked at each other. They seemed to feel that the visitor didn't come with good intentions. In the past, Right Wendy would always greet them with a smile and be very polite to them, who had level 1 authority and were the pillars of the company. He would never be so rude. However, after all, the other party was the boss. They had no temper and could only leave. Before leaving, Zhang Lanxin said with a worried look, "Boss, if Little Qin's experimental project made the company feel embarrassed or he spent too much money, I hope you can be magnanimous. I can bear part of the cost for Little Qin. The failure of the experiment isn't his fault alone." When he shook his head and smiled, "All right, go out. You don't need to worry about it." Zhang Lanxin wanted to say something, but stopped. Kong Ji, who was next to her, winked and dragged her away. The door of the laboratory was closed. Letter Winnie wanted to talk to Dean, but he saw Dean sitting on the chair next to him. He looked at his legs, as if he was the owner of the room, and looked at the two guests. When he slightly raised his eyebrows, he was unhappy in his heart. However, he knew the identity of the latter. His face was slightly cold as he indifferently said, "Mr. Chinamo, the consortium is looking for you. They need you to go over. Please." Dean looked at the man next to him with interest. "Rank 10. Oh no, it should be rank 11. I didn't expect that the consortium of the Federation could cultivate such a strong person. If I remember correctly, rank 9 is the ruler, rank 10 is the abyss. Rank 11 is the level of the middle abyss in the Empire. I don't know what kind of power you can display if you drive the monster mecha of La Consortium." Wendy was stunned. He turned to look at the man next to him. Chapter 1128. The consortium finally couldn't bear it anymore. Dean looked at him with interest. I was taken aback. He couldn't help but ask, "You already knew that we knew your identity? Are you talking about a tongue twister?" Dean glanced at the boss of the company. "I want to know the reason why you suddenly invited me to the consortium. Is it because the observation period is over? Or are you going to torture me for something?" Wright was about to open his mouth, but the brawny man next to him coldly said, "You will know the specific reason when you arrive at the consortium." Dean slightly raised his eyebrows and smiled. "So you are ready to forcibly kidnap me? This is the center of Odin area. How much do you think the losses will be caused if a fight breaks out here?" Wright's eyelids twitched as he looked at the brawny man next to him. The brawny man didn't wait for him to speak as he sneered. "If you resist, then we will kill you. If you don't want to die, then come with us obediently." "Are you threatening me?" Dean looked at him with a faint smile. The brawny man coldly said, "You can understand it that way." Dean smiled as he gently tapped the table. "There are 8 rank 10 masters in the surrounding buildings, 8 laser guns, 3 creators mecha on standby in the emergency tunnel 3 streets away, 5,000 troops, and 12 combat helicopters. Do you dare to threaten me?" Not only did Latwini's expression change drastically upon hearing this, even the burly man's pupils constricted and his expression changed. The smile on Dean's face disappeared little by little. He slowly stood up and indifferently looked at the brawny man. "Come over and kneel down." "What?" The burly man felt as if he had heard something unbelievable. His eyes widened, and then he laughed out loud in anger. "So what if you sensed it? Previously, I was afraid of your battle strength. Now that your perceptive ability is so strong, it indicates that you are a demon fighter with perceptive ability but weak fighting ability. Now that you know that we've been fully prepared, you should be obedient." "Noisy," Dudian coldly snorted. His body moved as fast as an afterimage. The brawny man's expression changed drastically, and he hurriedly pushed Let Wendy away. His entire body's skin transformed, and he entered the demon body. However, Halfway through the transformation, only a thin layer of cuticle-like scales grew on his skin. Before he could completely transform, a cold face appeared right in front of him. The burly man turned pale with fright and reflexively raised his hand to block. Gotcha! There was a sudden sharp pain in his knee, and the brawny man felt his body sinking. Dean, who was a head shorter than him, had to look up to see him. The brawny man was already kneeling on the ground, but his kneeling posture was very strange. His knees were bent back at 90 degrees, and his shoulders were firmly held by Dean's palm, making his body unable to move or stand up. You! The brawny man grimaced in pain. He felt humiliated, but at the same time, he felt a chill, especially when he saw Dean's indifferent eyes. He felt as if he was being stared at by a beast or tiger. He couldn't believe it. Was it the demon race from the Abyss? Why were they so strong? He hadn't used the demon's body, but his speed was so fast that it was hard to keep up with him. It seems that the Abyss, cultivated by the Federation, is a fake. Dean said lightly. Letwendy climbed up from the ground and saw Dudian's knees. His face was full of shock, and his body slightly trembled. The shadow of the demon race was engraved in the memory of his generation. At the moment he saw Dudian's ferocious means, it was like confirming the rumors. He wanted to escape immediately. You can't run away. The burly man gritted his teeth and endured the pain in his knees. Cold sweat had already seeped out of his forehead, and he said with a trembling voice, As long as you leave this place, they will immediately kill you, and the Chuangshi god Mecha will also immediately move out to exterminate you. No matter how strong you are, you won't be able to withstand the encirclement of 3 Chuangshi god Mecha. Our army will evacuate the surrounding people as soon as possible and won't give you the chance to take hostages. Even if you take hostages, it won't affect our judgment. We can completely suppress the deaths of a few people. He said these words in one breath, very smoothly, but after he finished speaking, he couldn't help but feel nervous. After all, his life and death were in the hands of others, and it was all in the hands of others. This kind of feeling could not help but be afraid. Consortium asked you to take me there. What are you going to do? Dean asked. The brawny man was startled. I don't know. I was ordered to take you back to Consortium. You don't know? Dean narrowed his eyes. The Consortium has long known my identity and indulged me to live here. There are always creators' armors on standby, and there is a lot of monitoring. Although I seem to be free, but I have been raised in this company. Do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing? The burly man's face changed, and he said with a trembling voice, I really don't know. Perhaps only the board members know. No matter what, you can't escape. You might as well surrender. Dean patted his face. It seems that the Consortium has long known that I'm a demon and that I'm an Abyss-level demon. But they allowed an Abyss demon to live in this bustling city. They aren't afraid that I'll go crazy and kill everyone. It's hard to believe that the Consortium's leader is not only confident, but also cold-blooded. He has enough confidence to kill me in this bustling city and doesn't mind the death of some people. It's hard to believe that such a person has good intentions towards me. The brawny man's face turned ugly. What do you want? I want freedom. Dean laughed. The brawny man was stunned. Gotcha. Dean twisted the neck of the brawny man. At the same time, he lowered his head and shot out like lightning. Puff! The moment he lowered his head, for lasers shot at him, piercing through the windows outside the building and burning a few black marks on the ground. Right Wendy, who was next to him, was so frightened that his entire body trembled. When Dean swooped out, he quickly broke through the building. His whole body was demonized, and a pair of wings appeared on his back. He flashed flexibly in the air and rushed to a nearby high-rise building. He saw that there was a restaurant in the high-rise building. The scenery was beautiful, and there were many celebrities sitting there. There was melodious music playing. At the moment, the glass outside the building was broken, and all the tranquility was broken. Dean rushed in and saw a young man wearing a black hat sitting by the window. The young man was holding a metal laser cannon in his hand. Die! Dean swooped down. His splitting blade cut the floor and walls of the restaurant. Two waiters were standing in the aisle with red wine and plates. Their bodies were cut into two pieces by Dean's wings. Chapter 1129. Dean quickly chased after him. Just as he was about to dive down, he suddenly felt a sense of danger. He braked in time. Less than half a meter in front of him, several laser beams were shot down. It was the other people who were blocking him. Bye-bye. The youth who climbed out of the building saw that Dean was frightened by the laser beams, and his heart was relieved. He grinned and no longer stayed. His body was like a gecko sticking to the glass outside the building, and he quickly climbed into the distance. As long as he kept a distance from Dean, the other people's long-range laser beams would be enough to kill Dean. Puff! Suddenly, a blazing feeling came from his forehead. The youth's smile froze on his face before the thought disappeared from his mind. His eyes were wide open, full of disbelief, indescribable panic, and despair. When the world went dark, the body of the youth fell from the building and hit the roadside flower bed, making a loud noise. All the passers-by around were stunned. Dean's eyes were indifferent. He retracted his gaze and turned to the restaurant. Under the panicked and frightened eyes, he broke the window and flew out. Like a giant eagle, he flew over the building and rushed to the rooftop of another building. There were two figures, a man and a woman, holding laser cannons. They were wearing sunglasses and dressed very coldly, like killers. Seeing Dean rushing over, there was a trace of panic on their faces. They immediately locked their laser cannons on Dean's body and shot. But Dean's body was erratic in the air. Before they could aim, he had moved away from the scope. After shooting several times, the two finally knew that it was impossible to lock Dean's body with laser cannons. After all, it was not a missile, so it could be installed with automatic tracking function. Run! The two panicked and fired a few shots to slow down Dean's speed. Then they ran to the other side of the building. They stimulated the demon body. The woman was like a spider crawling on the ground. Her abdomen became extremely bloated, and a large number of small spiders were ejected from her lower body. These small spiders scattered along the rooftop and quickly pulled a net to intercept Dean. Dying! Dean didn't plan to land in the air. His eyes flashed coldly. Two beams of light suddenly shot out from the bright red gem on his forehead, entering the back of the spider woman and the neck of the crocodile next to her. Their bodies stopped abruptly and fell forward to the ground. The laser cannons in their arms were thrown out of the rooftop and fell into the street below. Dean didn't stop. His body crossed an arc and rushed toward another building. How is it possible? When the 5 people hiding in the other 3 buildings saw this scene, their faces were filled with shock and disbelief. Under the encirclement of the 8 of them, the target had actually killed 3 of their teammates at lightning speed. It should be known that they were not ordinary people, but super powerhouses who had obtained the power of the demon race. Putting aside external power like Mecha, they were more than enough to look down on the people of the Federation. Since they had obtained the demon's power, they hadn't felt the threat of death for a long time. But at this moment, they felt a kind of creepy feeling. They felt a strong killing intent and shadow from the ferocious figure. In contrast, they seemed to have degenerated into ordinary people who could only rely on guns. Even if they had guns, they couldn't aim at the target and kill him. This is not an ordinary abyss demon. In one of the commercial buildings, 2 snipers looked at Dean, who was rushing to another building. Their faces were full of horror. They tried to aim and snipe, but Dean's figure was like a ghost. He flickered in the scope, and they couldn't lock him. They could only shoot randomly, but all of them were avoided. It seemed that the enemy clearly knew the time and direction of their shots. Hey, headquarters, requesting reinforcements. The enemy is not an ordinary abyss demon. What's the matter? A majestic voice came from the headset. Both of them anxiously reported, the enemy easily killed Myron. He can avoid our laser cannons. He has power beyond the ordinary abyss demon. He has the ability to fly and long-range shooting. He seems to be able to launch laser attacks. Moreover, he has a super strong perception ability. After saying so much in one breath, the 2 of them felt a trace of horror in their hearts. They suddenly discovered that the coverage of the target's magic marks was too wide. Generally speaking, magic marks that were good at perception were naturally weak in the aspect of combat. However, what the target had shown so far seemed to be a comprehensive ability. Every aspect was incomparably powerful. What kind of rare magic marks were these? In contrast, their magic marks were more than a level lower. How is it possible? Chairman, why are you here? What? A series of exclamations came from the earpiece, causing the two of them to be stunned. Soon, the boss took a deep breath and adjusted his breathing. Everyone retreat to the front line and cooperate with the creator's mecha to kill the target. The words were passed to everyone's headset through their communication channel. Even the three dead people could hear the boss's voice. Unfortunately, they couldn't hear it anymore. However, the remaining 5 people, or rather, 4 people, felt relieved after receiving the order and immediately retreated. Retreat? Dean threw away a demonic serpent that had its neck twisted. He glanced at the other 2 buildings where 4 people were in groups of 2. He saw that they were retreating in a hurry. He released his perception to a larger range. He saw that the 3 creators' mechs in the underground emergency tunnel had started to surround them. In addition, all the troops in the tunnel had been dispatched to evacuate the people in the surrounding buildings. Ready to get on the mecha? Dean narrowed his eyes. It was the first time that he had seen a creator's mecha. It was known as the top mecha. It was listed as a 5-star rated by the Federation military. It was said that it could shake the king of the empire and strangle all the abyss demons. At the moment, it rushed out of the emergency tunnel and showed extraordinary speed. It quickly surrounded the building where he was located, but didn't immediately attack. The 3 mechas were waiting for the army to evacuate the surrounding people. The longer they delayed, the better it would be for them. Dean didn't rush to attack. He held the laser cannon in his hand and stood on the edge of the rooftop. Under his feet was the abyss of the street. The pedestrians were as small as ants. He quietly looked at the 3 creators' mechas. His brows slightly wrinkled. He wasn't thinking about how to break out of the encirclement of the 3 mechas, but the motive and purpose of the consortium. They had allowed him to stay in the Randy company for a long time, but now they wanted to kill him because he disobeyed the order. While he was thinking, the surrounding troops had already dismissed many people. Dean also saw Zhang Lanxin and others in the Randy company's building being escorted by the army to the emergency tunnel. Chapter 1130. You're courting death. Dean's eyes narrowed. He lifted the laser cannon in his hand and fired. The laser beam flew out and pierced through one of the helicopters. The helicopter's propeller blades were broken. It tilted and rolled over. There was a burst of screams as it fell towards a nearby building. When it was about to hit the building, a creator's mecha ejected a large net from its wrist and caught the helicopter. Dean didn't pay attention to him as he turned to shoot at the other helicopters. The helicopters didn't expect that Dean would aim at them, so they panicked and launched laser cannons and missiles to attack. When the missiles were launched, the machete-like wings on Dean's back suddenly shook out a black light, like a black feather, and hit the missile. Bang! The missile was intercepted in midair. Whoosh! Dean's body flashed, and he dodged away the moment the laser cannon was launched. This laser cannon was not comparable to the laser cannons of the old era. In the old era, the laser guns and cannons couldn't kill the enemy, especially the laser gun. It could only destroy the enemy's pupils, blind them, and lose their combat effectiveness. Although the name was very powerful, the effect on the battlefield was average. But today's laser cannons and laser guns were like the movies of the old era. The laser was like a substance that could penetrate steel plates with high temperature. Moreover, it ignored the weather and could fight all day long. The laser cannons were also countless times stronger. The diameter of the muzzle was about 60 centimeters. It was enough to destroy half of a human's body into ashes. However, although the laser cannon was fast like a flash of lightning, the person who operated it had an ordinary physique. In Dean's eyes, the trigger of the laser cannon was like slow motion. There was enough time for him to predict and dodge. After avoiding the bombardment of several laser cannons, Dean also launched the laser cannon in his hand. Although both were laser weapons, the power of the laser cannon in his hand was obviously stronger. The laser cannon penetrated the head of the helicopter, and the cockpit exploded. The helicopter that lost control also fell, but was rescued by the creator's mecha below, so it didn't directly crash. Dean was carrying a huge laser cannon as he walked through the rain of bullets. Every time he lifted the cannon, an armed helicopter would fall to the ground. After a moment, there were no more helicopters in the sky. Dean stood at the top of the tall building. He could see more than half of the city under his feet. He saw a small aircraft flashing in the distance. It was a camera. It should be a reporter from some nearby news agency or some people with related hobbies. Dean naturally didn't worry about the problem of exposure. Anyway, his identity had been leaked. There was no place for him in the Federation. Even if he hid or fled, he could change his face. At his level of strength, the face was not important. He could change it at any time. What he cared about was the inside. Even for Dean, the inside was not important. He only cared about his heart. If he wanted to further gain strength, this heart full of divinity was also something that must be deprived. It's time to get serious, Dean muttered to himself. At this time, the creator's mecha that caught the fallen helicopter had already settled the several armed helicopters. The people in the helicopters were dispersed. The people who were escorted to the emergency tunnel by the army were also far away from the nearby underground emergency tunnel to avoid being affected by the battle. Only a few panicked and frightened figures were left within a radius of thousands of meters. Dean's eyes fell on the three creators' mecha. The creator's mecha looked like a human. It was extremely huge. It was about 12 meters tall. The whole body was golden. There were wings on the back. Obviously, they had the ability to fly. At first glance, it looked like a golden god. It was tall and majestic. Based on the appearance alone, it was the best among the many mechas. Dean's eyes penetrated the layers and saw the pilots inside the mecha. They were 3 rank 10 warriors. The military put an end to the demons. Even if the demons were cultivated by the Federation, they were either assembled by the terrorist consortium or sent into the army by the consortium. He took a deep breath. He didn't wait for the 3 creators' mechas to make a move. He took the lead and ejected a beam of light from the blood-red crystal on his forehead towards the creator's mecha that had saved the armed helicopters. They were waiting for the army to clean up the battlefield, but Dean couldn't drag this on any longer. The 3 demons in the mecha might not care about the lives of ordinary people, but they would definitely care about the other forces taking the opportunity to attack the terrorist consortium. It was inevitable that they would have some concerns. The beam of light was so fast that the creator's mecha didn't have time to react. But when the beam hit 3 meters in front of its head, it suddenly stirred up a ripple. It was an automatic defensive energy shield that blocked the beam of light. Dean's eyes darkened. He raised the laser cannon in his hand and quickly fired. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 7 or 8 laser beams were fired in a row. Without exception, all of them hit the target. Although the god of creation reacted to Dean's finger and muzzle, Dean's aiming speed was too fast. He was 1 step ahead of the god of creation in predicting all the dodging positions. The energy shield outside the creator's mecha rippled like water. When Dean fired the last shot, the energy shield was broken and the beam hit the mecha's shoulder, leaving a faint burn mark on the golden shoulder armor. Dean narrowed his eyes. The toughness of the creator's mecha was beyond his expectations. The power of the laser cannon was enough to obliterate all abyssal-level life forms. Only some monsters that had evolved special armor or scales could block it. If it was an abyssal-level human, no one would be able to block it without using their demonic body. But at this moment, not even the paint on the surface of the creator's mecha was wiped off. Of course, maybe the golden color wasn't the paint. Whoosh! Dean threw away the laser cannon that had exhausted its energy plate and swooped down from the tall building. His wings spread out and shot towards the creator's mecha like a sharp sword. The short-haired young demon in the creator's mecha sneered. His hands were inserted into 2 white balls, and he was wearing a ring on his head. At this moment, he waved his hands. The arms of the creator's mecha also waved, but the speed was extremely fast. Coupled with the prediction of the mecha's intelligence system, the punch intercepted the best attack trajectory of Dean's dive. Dean's body suddenly stopped and twisted quickly. The strong momentum made his wings feel like they were being torn, but he temporarily changed his trajectory and turned at a faster speed to the top of the Genesis god's head. For him, this distance was covered in the blink of an eye. Chapter 11:31. Dean didn't meet the blade head-on. He twisted his body again and slid to the shoulder of the creation god mecha. At the moment when he was about to touch the mecha, he felt an unusual sense of danger. His wings suddenly expanded, and the wind filled the inside of his wings in an instant. He stopped his body abruptly. He saw a white light flashing through the gap between him and the creation god mecha's shoulder. Dean saw a creation god mecha next to him shoot a laser from its finger. Holy light strike! A trace of anger flashed across the face of the short-haired young man in the Genesis god mech. He looked coldly at the Genesis god mech that had helped him. Although he was angry, he did not miss this opportunity. The target had already entered the 50-meter radius of the mech's holy light. He immediately used the most violent method to counterattack. Dean was always paying attention to the operators of the three creation god mecha through his X-ray vision. When he saw the short-haired youth quickly press the button, he immediately guessed what he was going to do. His eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't retreat, but continued to pounce on the ladder. At the same time, he used the Sun Beast gem on his forehead to shoot out beams of light. These beams were not aimlessly scattered, but covered the whole body of the creation god mecha. When the short-haired youth launched the holy light strike, the fingers, shoulders, chest, and other armors of the creation god mecha suddenly deformed. From the inside, a dark muzzle-like caliber was exposed. There was a faint light preheating and firing. The whole preheating process was less than 0.1 seconds. However, Dean seemed to have predicted it in advance. When these parts of the armor were removed to expose the firing caliber, the beam of light from his forehead shot into these caliber. In an instant, a violent explosion sounded from the whole body of the creation god mecha. The short-haired youth sitting in the cockpit of the mecha was completely stunned. The violent vibration of the mecha and the shaking screen in front of him made him feel dizzy. He couldn't help but open his eyes wide in disbelief. Break! Dean seized the gap of the explosion and approached in an instant. This time, even the two Genesis god mecha next to him didn't expect such a situation to occur and couldn't act in time. The splitting blades on his body stood up like a tail, turned into sharp blades, and suddenly stabbed out. In an instant, he stabbed thousands of times. The special golden alloy on the surface of the Genesis god mecha was broken, and cracks and holes of different sizes were cut out. Dean roared as he swung his tail blade. It was like a black whirlwind chopper as it slammed into the neck of the creator's mech kacha. The head of the creator's mech was cut off along with the jumping electric light. Dean quickly tore the fibrous tube in his neck, then shrank his wings and drilled into it. The pupils of the short-haired youth shrank to the size of a pinhole as he looked at Dean, who broke into the cockpit from above. His face was full of horror, as if he had seen a ghost. Before he could use the devil's body, a sharp blade suddenly shot out from Dean's chest and pierced his head. After doing this, Dean shrank all the blades on his body so as not to cut the surrounding equipment. He pulled up the body of the short-haired youth and threw it along the neck of the mecha. Then he sat down in his seat and glanced at the control board in front of him. Compared to the black lizard mecha he used in the military, this Genesis god mecha was of a higher grade. However, its operating interface was more concise. Unlike the black lizard mecha, there were hundreds of basic keys plus complex keys. This mecha only had a total of 8 keys. It mainly relied on nerves to connect the mecha. Although it was operated by humans, the intelligence system of the mecha would also assist the human brain. It It was a combination of human and machine synchronization. It was also the highest crystallization of federal technology. It's worthy to be evaluated as a king's mecca. All the performance is top-notch. Fortunately, I have learned about the operation of the Genesis God Mecha before. I have also seen some promotional videos of the Genesis God Mecha. Otherwise, the Holy Strike alone would be enough to blow most of my body into ashes. Dean was paying attention to the other two creators' armors while checking the damage of the one he was in. Energy shield charging, need 28 minutes 47 seconds, weapon system damage 23. 7%. 73 laser tubes broken. Do you want to replace? Dean frowned slightly when he heard the words from the intelligent voice. At this moment, he didn't put on the helmet and used nerves to connect to the mecha. The Genesis God mecha had been bound to the short-haired youth. Only the manufacturer had the ability to unlock it. He could only use primitive means to operate it. When he heard the inspection report, he once again felt the horror of the Genesis God mecha. Previously, it had withstood 7 or 8 laser beams to barely penetrate the energy shield. Unexpectedly, it only needed half an hour to repair. As for the damage caused by the Holy Strike, it covered the entire body of the mecha. However, the damage was less than 1/5. This meant that although the Holy Strike was powerful, it wasn't the only attack method of the Genesis God mecha. Moreover, it could be replaced. This endurance is even more terrifying than the King's. I don't know what energy is used to drive the mecha. Even nuclear kinetic energy may not be able to bring such endurance. This thought flashed in Dean's mind. He immediately chose to replace the laser tube. He saw that the joints of the mecha were pulled open. Broken metal fragments were ejected from inside. Soon, the intelligent system's prompt sounded. The laser tube had been replaced. Once again, the Holy Strike could be used. Dean didn't continue to operate. Instead, he looked at the two Genesis God mechas in the distance. Through the outside of the mecha, he could see the expressions of the two people inside. There was a bit of coldness and dignity in them. If I didn't understand this Genesis God mecha and could see the operation inside through the X-ray, I might not be a match for this thing with my strength. Dean looked at the two people who were constantly approaching. His eyes flashed. The reason why he didn't escape at the first moment, but braced himself to fight against the 3 Genesis God mechas, was because he knew that if he escaped from the city, he would die faster. At that time, with the force of the terrorist consortium, they could unscrupulously send more Genesis God mechas to encircle him. They wouldn't have to worry about civilian casualties and excessive damage. But now that he had snatched a Genesis God mecha, he could exert several times his strength. There was no need to continue to fight with these people. Holy Strike, divert. Dean's fingers quickly skimmed over the virtual keyboard. The upper and lower body of the mecha suddenly twisted in different directions. A burst of light beams shot out and shrouded the two creators' mechas, one from the front and one from the back. Chapter 1132. After Dean left with the creator's mecha, several officers in a hidden underground tunnel received the news. They raised their hands and clenched their fists to signal the troops to stop. Why don't we go? Let's go. What's going on? Under the protection of the army, many scientists and executives of the Randy Company panicked when they saw the army suddenly stop, and they couldn't help but urge anxiously. Lanxin, is that Qin Mo? Kong Ji, Zhang Lanxin, Chu Huiru, and the other scientists with Level 1 authority stood together. At this moment, when everyone was anxious, Kong Ji was very calm. This old man had a worried look on his face as he asked Zhang Lanxin in a low voice. Zhang Lanxin had a complex expression as she was speechless, although they had retreated in a hurry, but they had seen the scene of Dudian shooting the helicopter. They had heard the words of the officers, so they knew that it was a demon invasion. But the demon turned out to be Qin Mo. Zhang Lanxin repeatedly recalled the past few months of getting along with him. The enthusiasm, seriousness, concentration, and kindness of the young man made her feel that he was impeccable. She really couldn't combine this delicate and pretty face with the fiendish devil clan. But the truth forced her to believe it was true. She couldn't help but think, could it be that there were good and bad devil clan? Everyone be quiet. Amidst the noise and anxiety in the surroundings, a tall and sturdy officer with strong arms roared. After everyone quieted down, he said loudly, "The demon clan has already left this place and went somewhere else. This is the safest place for the time being. Everyone, don't panic. If we continue to retreat, it's hard to guarantee that we won't encounter the demon clan again. Everyone, stay here first and wait for the detailed situation on the surface to come before making a plan." Everyone was relieved as they heard that the demon had left. Some of them patted their chest as if they were relieved. "He has left?" Kang Ji looked at the sky and seemed to be relieved. Zhang Lanxin noticed his expression, and her heart moved slightly. Then, she seemed to have thought of something. Her old face revealed a trace of gentleness, and she said in an extremely low voice, "Perhaps he is a good demon. I hope he can leave. If he is caught, I hope the higher-ups can give him a chance to change." Chu Huiru's eyes widened as she heard their words. She felt that the two old scientists were crazy. They were worried about a demon. What a pity. I probably won't be able to see him again. Kang Ji's lips curled into a bitter smile. When he noticed that someone was looking at him, his expression immediately became indifferent. Whoosh! The wind was whistling in his ears. In Dean's line of sight, the building under his feet was rapidly moving backward. The two creators' mechs were desperately chasing after him. However, the performance of the mech was the same. Dean rushed out of the encirclement and opened the distance. Although he started the mech's fastest speed, he could only maintain this distance. He couldn't get closer unless the energy of the creator's mech was exhausted. From the intensity of the previous battle, his energy consumption was clearly higher than that of the other two mecha. However, the remaining energy inside was enough to support him charging out of Duio City and a large distance away from the Federation. Once we get out of the city, we'll go to the demonic creature zone outside the peace circle. Hopefully, we'll find a chance to escape. Dean's eyes were dignified. His mind was quickly thinking of a way to escape, but he suddenly felt that something was wrong. It seemed that he had ignored something. At this time, a towering city wall appeared at the end of his line of sight. He had reached the end of Duio City. I've been running for 3 minutes. During this time, they shouldn't have enough time to mobilize other creators' mechs to surround me. Dean looked at the city wall that was getting closer and closer. His brows gradually wrinkled. He hesitated for a moment, but he still gritted his teeth and pushed the creator's mech. He directly rushed over. There was no absolute strategy. At the critical moment, he still had to take risks. Soon, Dean was close to the city wall. He saw a large number of cannons being mobilized and fired at him. Dean was relieved to see that the city defense weapons had locked onto him. He quickly looked around. He didn't see any other creators' mechs. His heart settled down. He cooperated with the creator's mech's AI system and flexibly flashed among the cannons and lasers. The strength of these attacks was detected by the AI system. Some of the strength could be ignored. He only chose the attacks that were enough to affect his speed and bring damage to the mech. It had to be said that the AI system of the mech was extremely powerful. Even in such a disadvantageous situation, it still picked the best plan. Moreover, it was calculated in minutes and seconds. It was many times faster than human judgment. The creator's mech rushed out of the flames like a golden lightning. The golden mech was like a god. It was unscathed. Its terrifying defense shocked the many soldiers on the city wall. Before they could continue the second wave of firepower, 2 golden beams rushed over. An officer immediately ordered them to let go. Whoosh, whoosh. After the 2 golden beams rushed over, a tsunami-like roar swept from behind. It was as if the whole world was roaring. This was the sound of the wind driven by the mech. Energy, 37%. Dean glanced at the energy display on the mech. It only had 3.5 bars. Things that he had learned during this period of time appeared in his mind. The range and distance of the peace circle, as well as the area it contained, appeared in his mind. He quickly calculated in his mind. Combined with the previous journey and energy consumption, the result was that he could barely rush out of the peace circle. Whoosh! A laser flew over from behind and hit the wings on the back of the mech. It made the mech lose balance and almost slide to the ground. However, the balance system and AI system of the mech quickly adjusted and stabilized the tilt. However, the speed was greatly reduced. Demon Clan, surrender yourselves. A cold woman's voice suddenly came from the communication device in the mech. Dean glanced at the two mechs behind him. He saw that it was the woman in one of the mechs who was talking. He frowned slightly. Suddenly, he felt that the bad premonition that he had ignored before emerged again. Stubborn. Prepare to die. The woman saw that Dean ignored her, and a trace of annoyance flashed in her eyes. Dean's face suddenly changed. It was not because of the woman's words, but because he finally realized what he had ignored. Not good. Dean was just about to stand up and rush out of the mech. Suddenly, a tough alloy belt extended from the back of the cockpit chair and firmly tied his body to the cockpit chair. At the same time, the virtual keyboard in front of him automatically shrank and disappeared. The only window became blood red, and the number 3 jumped out. Start self-destruct program. The AI of the mech said in a dull voice. Chapter 11:33. Break for me? Dean's hair stood up, and he roared. His body crazily grew, cutting blades like messy magic tentacles, and instantly pierced the driver's seat. However, after using too much strength, his heart suddenly pounded madly and violently vibrated. This vibration spread throughout his entire body, as if all the muscles in his body were trembling and contracting along with his heartbeat. Even his consciousness was buzzing, and he felt dizzy. Dean's eyes flashed a trace of trance, but in the blink of an eye, he sobered up and waved the sharp blades to cut the alloy belt that bound his body. Bang! The alloy belt was cut by the sharp blades, and it made a harsh sound. What shocked Dean was that the toughness of the alloy belt was beyond his imagination. He had been using the cutting blades for so many years, but he couldn't cut the alloy belt that was less than a centimeter thick. How was it possible? Dean was stunned for a moment. He saw the number on the screen had changed to 2. When he noticed it, the number changed again and changed to 1. His pupils shrank slightly. At this moment, he felt that the blood in his body seemed to flow against the current and burst into his mind. An unprecedented sense of danger made him feel that the time seemed to stop. No, 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 his consciousness shouted. The next moment, the cutting blades all over his body shrank at an unprecedented speed and returned to his body. The whole process took less than half a second. The moment the cutting blades retracted into his body, a strong light emitted from his body. It was dazzling, and the temperature in the cockpit soared. Whoosh! Dean's body melted like magma and flowed out of the alloy belt. Among them, a mass of red mucus rushed out the fastest, and suddenly turned into a sharp blade, rushing along the neck of the mech. The whole process happened in 1 second, as fast as a phantom. When the bright red mucus rushed out of the mech, the scene outside the mech also appeared in Dean's line of sight. He was just about to breathe a sigh of relief, but he was suddenly stunned. Bang! The creator's mech suddenly exploded in midair. It was as if a nuclear missile had exploded in midair, and the loud sound could be heard for hundreds of miles, even reaching the sky above the nearest city. The debris, smoke, and ash from the explosion spread like a mushroom cloud. The small night rats on the ground nearby were so frightened that they immediately crawled back into their nests, shivering. Before the smoke dissipated, 2 golden flashes of light shot into the mushroom cloud. Half a minute later, the 2 mechs rushed out of the mushroom cloud and stopped in midair nearby. One of the Genesis God mechs had a square energy matrix in its huge mechanical palm. In this energy matrix was a stone ball. It was extremely round, but the surface of the stone ball was covered with cracks. Some of the cracks had collapsed, revealing pits. There's actually still life. The red-haired woman in the mecha sucked in a breath of cold air, her eyes filled with shock. Through the mecha's AI system, she could detect that the stone ball contained heat. Although it was extremely weak, it was still the heat of a living being. This stone ball was the only object at the center of the explosion, and it was clearly the ferocious devil. This is the demonized form of the devil race? How could this be? We seem to have seen him transform into that monster with blades all over his body. Could it be that he can transform into two demonic bodies? The middle-aged man in the other mecha was a little shocked, and his gaze became serious. I've never heard of a demon being able to transform into two forms. No wonder the higher-ups ordered us to capture him alive. It seems like this demon is somewhat special. The red-haired woman replied through the communicator. After she finished speaking, her gaze once again landed on the stone ball, and she said, "This demon's defense is too terrifying to actually be able to survive the self-destruction of the Genesis god mech. Moreover, we use an energy matrix to bind the surroundings of the mech, compressing the explosive energy into the matrix. It's hard to imagine how powerful the explosion inside was. Not only did he not turn into ashes, he actually survived." The middle-aged man nodded slightly when he heard this. There was some fear in his eyes as he said, "Let's go. Send him back as soon as possible to avoid any complications." "All right." The red-haired woman nodded. "Let's leave this place for the people behind to clean up. There shouldn't be anything missing." After the two of them finished speaking, they drove their mecha back and left. After flying for less than 1,000 meters, they met two Genesis god mechs that were rushing over. Including the 3 from before, there were a total of 5. This was Terrace's foundation. In order to capture a demon, they had sent out 5 Genesis god mechs at once. The performance of each mech was comparable to the king of the empire. 10 minutes later, the two mechs flew back to a desert on the outskirts of Duyo City. This desert was surrounded by a stone wall, and the entire desert was enclosed. There were windmills, power stations, and solar panels everywhere in the desert. There were also some strange white birds and patrolling soldiers in black uniforms. If one looked closely, they would also discover that there were tiny black insects crawling on some of the plants in the desert. However, the carapaces of these insects shone with a metallic luster. They were mechanically constructed scouting insects that could be found all over the desert. This desert was also one of the main bases of the Terrace Financial Group. The two mechs stopped in front of an ancient castle-like building complex in the middle of the desert. There were many soldiers in black uniforms stationed outside the building complex. There were a few chariots parked inside the ancient castle, and there was also a large shed that covered an area of thousands of square meters. There were various types of mechs lined up inside. "It's us. Open the door." The red-haired lady connected to the base's communication screen. Her figure also appeared on the virtual projection of the base. The door in front of the ancient castle quickly opened. She controlled the mech and arrived in front of a building beside the ancient castle. This building looked like the dorsal fin of a fish. There were many strange buildings with sharp spikes. At the bottom was a deep and huge entrance that looked like a giant mouth. The red-haired lady and the mech transported the stone orb into the deep and huge entrance, and they arrived at the base below the ancient castle. The two of them sat in the mech. After going through many layers of identity verification, they arrived at the lowest level of the base. There were many people standing on a high platform. They seemed to be waiting for the two of them, and they had already prepared a cage. This cage was a huge square energy barrier that was about 10 meters long. At this moment, after the red-haired lady sent the stone orb in the mech's hand into the energy barrier, the entire energy barrier instantly solidified. Outside the energy barrier, another 5 energy barriers were erected, making a total of 6 energy barriers. They stacked on top of each other, trapping the stone orb within. There were 6 grooves on the alloy floor below the energy barrier. Every energy barrier rose from the grooves and formed in midair. Chapter 1134. While everyone was talking about the stone orb, a slender middle-aged man walked over. He was wearing a black robe with gold embroidery. He looked like a priest in a church, but he also looked like an old gentleman. His gestures were full of etiquette and elegance. Seeing this middle-aged man appear, everyone was shocked and quickly said, "Chairman." Black Slody nodded slightly. His eyes jumped over everyone and looked at the stone orb in the huge energy shield in front of the high platform. He was startled for a moment and frowned. "This is the demon?" Everyone looked at each other, and no one answered. At this time, the red-haired woman in the cockpit jumped down and landed below the high platform. She bowed her head and said, "Reporting to the chairman, this is the demon you want us to arrest. He is very fierce and has killed many of our companions in a row. He has shown extraordinary abilities in hand-to-hand combat. I suspect that he has 2 different magic mark abilities. Fortunately, the AI had already arranged a plan for us to ambush him. He was successfully fooled and snatched a Genesis god mech. The AI detonated the mech and seriously injured him." When Black Slody heard the words AI, his eyelids slightly twitched, but no one noticed. After the red-haired woman finished speaking, he continued to ask, "Then why is he a stone now?" Alicia whispered, "Although he looks like a stone, this should be caused by his magic mark ability. I speculate that he should have activated this ability at the moment when the Genesis god mech exploded. His whole body petrified and increased his defense to the maximum. However, the power of the Genesis god mech's explosion is no less than a nuclear weapon. Although he barely survived, he should have fainted at the moment. His mind is not clear, but his body is instinctively maintaining magic power. When he wakes up, he should return to his human appearance." Hearing her words, Black Slody nodded slightly to show that he understood. The other higher-ups behind him had a look of realization. They thought that this demon that Black Slody paid attention to was originally a stone, which was why he was so special. "Chairman, can you give this monster to me?" An old man wearing thick glasses asked with a hint of respect and fanaticism. He was not tall and had a hunchback, so he looked even shorter in the crowd. However, when the people around him heard his words, they looked at him with some fear. "Chairman," Elisa said that this monster may have 2 kinds of magic marks. If it's true, then once I study the secrets of his body, the combat power of the demons we produce will be greatly increased. This is an excellent experimental material. I hope Chairman can give it to us." Another old man in a white robe said. He was skinny, and only the whites of one of his eyes remained, making him look somewhat frightening. When the other upper echelons heard the 2 of them snatching the demon clan, they all revealed mocking smiles as if they were watching a show. Among them, there were a few people who revealed undetectable sneers, as if they were mocking them for overestimating themselves. When Alicia heard the old man say the word, "give birth," her fingers curled slightly, but she quickly loosened them. However, a hint of anger and killing intent flashed through her eyes. "Stop arguing." Black Slody frowned slightly, interrupting the 2 of them. He said, "This demon clan is to be handed over to the higher-ups. It's not something you can touch." "The higher-ups?" The crowd was stunned when they heard Black Slody's words. Then, their expressions changed. Black Slody was the chairman of the Terrace Financial Group. Even the other directors of the financial group with high statuses would have to nod in approval in front of him, and he also had the right to fire the other directors. As the person with the highest status in the Terrace Financial Group, it could be said that even the chairman of the Federation would have to greet him when they met. After all, the ordinary citizens might not know, but they knew that most of the previous chairmen of the Federation had been supported by the Terrace Financial Group. They had people in the military and other departments. As long as Black Slody was willing, he could even dismiss a chairman. In the entire Federation, the ones who truly held the lifeline and power were the 4 large financial groups. And the Terrace Financial Group was the most powerful financial group among the 4 large financial groups. There was probably only one person that Black Slody referred to as the higher-ups. Thinking of the existence of that person, the crowd fell silent. They looked at each other, and no one spoke again. The 2 old men who had already thought of a way to argue shut their mouths in embarrassment. They looked at each other, feeling very awkward. Let's do a test on him first. Don't let him die of weakness, Black Slody instructed. Rudy ordered. Everyone else, disperse. Don't tell anyone about this matter, lest it causes unnecessary negative effects. Yes, Chairman. The crowd responded. Some left. Some went to find a technician to test the stone orb in the energy barrier, while the rest waited where they were. This level was where they worked, and it was clear that they could not leave Black Slody behind to attend to the matters at hand. Soon, the test report of the stone orb was out. Terrace equipment could completely analyze the stone orb through the energy barrier. It could even detect the blood type. There was no need to draw blood for testing, and the data obtained would not be wrong. Chairman, this stone orb is indeed that demon. He still has a weak life force. Look at his body. His heart is still beating weakly. A bespectacled middle-aged man passed a set of pictures to Black Slody. Black Slody casually flipped through the pictures. They were pictures of the interior of the stone orb. He could see the outlines of flesh and bones within the stone orb, as well as organs such as a skull and intestines. The most eye-catching thing was a golden heart. Seeing this strange scene, Black Slody frowned slightly. He felt a little uncomfortable. The interior of the stone orb looked like a ball of minced meat mixed with bones and organs. It was as if it was stuffed with minced corpses. It's good that he's not dead. He returned the pictures to the middle-aged man and asked, Is his life in danger? Does he need treatment? The middle-aged man felt a little awkward. This was the first time he had seen such a youth, and he could not be sure. However, since the chairman had asked, he did not dare to answer directly. After thinking for a moment, he could only say, Chairman, if you want him to live, you still need to treat him. Black Slody said, Then treat him. Also, wake him up as soon as possible. Yes, Chairman, the middle-aged man said. In the cold darkness, in a trance, Dean felt a faint warmth spreading throughout his body. Surrounded by this warmth, he felt his consciousness become a little clearer. He was no longer in a trance, and he was no longer stimulated by the intense pain. He opened his eyes and saw an almost transparent energy shield. Outside the energy shield was a huge room, and there were many people walking in the room. From the way they were dressed, they looked like researchers. Some of them were pointing in his direction and saying something, and the assistants beside them were recording what they were saying in a notebook. Dean was startled. The next moment, the memories flowed back like a tide. The explosion, the countdown, the heat wave, the mecha, the alloy belt, the blue sky, the square energy matrix, all the pictures suddenly shrank back to his brain. He could not help but shiver. He took a deep breath and looked down at his body. But as he looked down, he found that his appearance was a bit strange. It was a round stone orb. The memory fragments flashed. The moment the explosion spread out, he stimulated the magic marks of the tortoise and petrified his whole body. In addition to the basic petrification, he shrunk his body into the shape of a ball. So he turned into a stone orb, because the spherical shape was the best way to remove the force. I'm not dead. I'm still alive. Dean was relieved, but then his mood became gloomy again. He was caught after all. He did not know what the other party wanted to do with him, but it was definitely not just to kill the demon race. At this time, Dean saw that several researchers seemed to have noticed his situation and exclaimed. Then more people turned to look at him. For a moment, he felt like an orangutan in the zoo, and a special orangutan, so he was surrounded by exclamations. Since he was noticed, Dean did not continue to pretend to sleep. He slowly stretched his body and returned to his human appearance. This time, he felt that part of his body's potential was stimulated. When he broke free from the alloy belt, he used the ability of the sun beast to melt his whole body. This ability was not simply the ability of the sun beast, but more like the ability of the extreme ice worm. The extreme ice worm would not die even if it was cut into countless pieces. As long as it was given time, it would attract and reunite with each other and restore its whole body again. The moment he rushed out of the mecha, he also had this ability. He felt that he could control all parts of his body, every organ, and even every cell. This feeling was very magical. It should be known that ordinary people had very poor control of their own body. For example, it was difficult to make the eyeballs rotate in two different directions. Most people could not even control their ears, let alone control their stomach wriggling, intestines twisting, heart beating, lungs breathing, and so on. Dean slowly got up and felt his body. Then he slowly walked to the front of the energy shield. He raised his hand, and his arm gradually turned into a dark, sharp blade. But it was only the limited demonization of his arm. He slashed at the energy shield. Bang! The sharp blade pierced through the energy shield, but there was another energy shield outside. When it pierced the second layer of the energy shield, it was stopped. The next moment, the energy shield that was pierced quickly healed. Dean quickly retracted his sharp blade arm. When it retracted to the tip of the blade, he deliberately paused for a moment. The healed energy shield was like a laser, cutting off the fingernail-sized blade. Sure enough, during the battle and the time when I was in a coma, my body was examined in detail. I could barely pierce through one layer of this energy shield. There are 6 grooves underground. If I want to pierce through 6 layers of energy shields, I don't know if I can condense the strongest sun beast ray. But there isn't such strong light here to borrow. Dean's eyes flashed slightly. He sat cross-legged in the middle of the energy shield. Obviously, it was not possible to escape from here. Moreover, since the enemy had captured him, they should not be slowly raising him. Otherwise, they would not suddenly summon him. What is the purpose of capturing me? Dean frowned. He could not figure it out. Suddenly, he felt that he should not be thinking without a clue. The enemy knew his identity as a demon. This was the root of the problem. Thinking of this, he immediately began to comb through the matter from the moment he killed Su Ming and stole his mecha to sneak into the Federation. While Dean was thinking, the staff outside the energy shield called Jasaloti and reported to him. Jasaloti looked at Dean, who was sitting cross-legged in the energy shield. It was indeed the same as in the previous photo. He nodded and ordered everyone to leave. No one was allowed to enter without his permission. Soon, all the staff left. You also leave, Jasaloti said to the guards. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.